What is happening out there, rotoscouts football fans? What's going on, gang? Happy Saturday afternoon. Rainy, ugly, gray Saturday here. Perfect day for, it turns out, three things. Sleeping in. Went to bed around 5, woke up around 11:30. Got some baseball content up on the site. Ran over to the dispensary. Got that taken care of. And then just been hanging out with some football. Looking at some numbers. Throwing some new stuff into the dashboard. Take a look at some stuff. Make it a little bit more fantasy-oriented. A little bit more DFS-oriented. I think we've been down the rabbit hole a little bit on just like, looking at the single and two-game football numbers. We're definitely going to go through it. Don't get me wrong. We'll still be looking at target shares and all the important stuff. But I threw in like some of the rankings, how they ranked out positionally from the website. The projections, obviously. So we're just going to keep a focus on that. We're going to go through game by game. We'll talk about everything here. But it's a really interesting slate. I think we got a lot to talk about as usual. Got a few folks here already. PoDegen Stoner's been hanging out for the last hour and a half waiting for the show to start. Wake and Bake DFS football bitches from Garden City, Colorado for PoDegen Stoner. He reminds us also, smash the like button, you nerds. You football nerds. 8 games here. 8 games says he presses the like button 2 times. It's always helpful. Very kind of you. Trey McKelly got to do things in 3s. I like that. Nikola Tesla, Laws of the Universe. What's up, Trey? Rob F is here. Sir Spence the King's here. What is happening? Anybody got some strong takes on this slate? How we thinking about this slate? There's obviously the one big meatball game that I think everybody's going to be going to. I think it's well worth going to. We'll get into it. A lot of highly projected players from that game. Bear with me one sec. I just updated the projections on the site a little while ago, just to catch the Jalen Waddle news. When we look at the rankings, I didn't get a chance to update the rankings for that change yet. So some of the wide receiver rankings will be slightly different when you see them when they get updated after the show. But good enough for government work, as they say. Rob F likes the Deshaun Watson spot this week. All right. I could get into that. That would be a fun one to see. I can't imagine it's going to be super popular. Where's he at on our board here? He does rank out pretty well. Why not get started there, gang? Quarterbacks. Deshaun lands 7th by DK points, 3rd by DK value. 7th and 5th on FanDuel. Pretty solid little projection there against Tennessee. It is that pass funnel. Oh, shut up, Joker. Joker's excited about it. Joker loves Deshaun. Deshaun is on. He's in the Superflex team for my Dynasty team, my fantasy team. So, yeah, I got to get on board with that one. Ranks out very well, projects very well. Got a monster up at the top, obviously, in Justin Herbert. We talked. That was the one I was referring to obliquely. Kirk Cousins. Right here, Cousins actually leading the league in passing right now. He's had a monster start to his season. I like his side of it just as much as I like the other side. And if he's not his own, I'll definitely go there pretty aggressively. They rank out very, very well in that game. That's the one with the big total. So we'll really get started over here, just looking at some of the game by game. Trey, I like Dak. Yeah, Dak projects out very, very well. I think he's the player. He'll probably be in the above-below column, which I haven't written yet, but that'll be up on the site later on. But yeah, Dak is one of the players that I seem to be out ahead of the industry on. So he'll probably have a nice little write-up in the above column there. We've got some good totals on the board. 46.5 points in the game between Detroit and Atlanta, which is an interesting one. We've got kind of a mixed bag of defense on both sides, which is about how they were projected. Detroit was projected 13th and 14th offensive and defensive DVOA. On the defensive side, though, they're 11th against the run, but 23rd against the pass. On the Atlanta side, they're 22nd against the pass, 2nd against the run. This is by yards. Yards per rushing attempt, yards per passing attempt. I'm trying to simplify some of these things so that we can just kind of talk about these defenses and there's obviously all sorts of metrics like big plays and stuff metrics and so on and so forth that you can get into. I just kind of want to keep it simple with some of just like, hey, what's the most basic thing that we need to look at? The yardage that they're giving up. And obviously, the scoring. There's all different ways to look at it, of course. And we can start adding some of that in. I felt like we were going in a lot of different directions on the last couple of shows, so I want to kind of simplify this. So I added in the rankings here. Obviously updated the yardage allowed. In the Washington game, Buffalo at Washington, obviously pretty heavily favored Buffalo team. Ranks out as a pretty decent spot, at least for the Allen and Diggs combo. And I like Gabe Davis in that game. He's just a player that I get to a decent amount, pretty decent downfield receiver. If they're going to be flinging the ball around, I feel like Josh Allen's going to take a few shots down the field. So could be a day for them. If you believe in the idea of using run back plays, there's obviously some decent ones with Terry McLaurin, John Dotson on the other side of this game. Brian Robinson, if you like the running back in that spot. They're going to have to be moving the ball if they're going to keep up with Buffalo, if they're going to stay in that one. 42.5 point total. Not one of the biggest totals on the board, but certainly playable. And a lot of decent parts in that one, particularly on the Buffalo side. 42 points between Carolina and Seattle. I like the Carolina side. Kind of obvious take. Riding with Andy Dalton. I don't really know if we're going that direction. He's very, very cheap on the DK board, 6,200 on the FanDuel slate, but doesn't project out all that great. I don't really love his weapons. Thielen's a good receiver, has had a good career, had a good week last week, but we're not exactly working with prime Adam Thielen anymore. DJ is more of a downfield option. Mingo, kind of a wait and see mode. Hayden Hurst, a capable tight end, but it's Andy Dalton at this point. I don't know. I know he was all right last year, but I'm not a big believer. Last year, Dalton, 7.9 intended air yards per attempt. Completed 66% of his passes, just in those basic 2022 numbers that I had in there. He'll be going up against the 30th ranked pass defense right now by pass yards per pass attempt. 8.9 yards per pass attempt right now being allowed by Seattle, while they are stuffing the run. 2.9 yards per rush attempt. So with the idea that Andy's going to be throwing the ball a little bit, maybe you can look there for some value. I just don't really love the options. Not my favorite spot. I like the Seattle side a lot more. I think that's a kind of an obvious take. Carolina defending the pass okay. 8th ranked, 5.4 yards per pass attempt. Giving up a little bit on the ground. Maybe Kenny Walker has a day, but Geno's got two really good weapons in DK and Tyler Lockett. He's also got the third receiver that they haven't really gotten all that involved yet, but seems like a capable kid. 48.5 points in the Chicago KC game is kind of interesting. Justin Fields has obviously been pretty bad so far, but he's got so much ability. He's got so much big game upside. DJ Moore got a little bit more involved last time out, projects out fairly well. Not very high priced on either site. I don't mind the DJ Moore option. I think Mooney's got talent. I think Chase Claypool's got talent buried down here for very cheap. I'm not giving up on the Chase Claypool idea. I think that's one that's until he's just out of the picture there. The issue is KC favored by 13 points. They get out ahead. They just start burning the clock. How much upside does Chicago end up really having, especially if Justin Fields is still not on form? That said, Pat Mahomes, I've got Pat Mahomes a little bit behind the industry average. He might be in that article, the above below, in terms of being a little bit below where everybody else has him. Still projects out great. One of the higher quarterback projections. Don't get me wrong. Love Pat Mahomes. It's an obvious spot to go to. He's got an awesome weapon in Travis Kelce. It's just for the money. Might not be my favorite option on the board. And again, if they get out ahead, they're probably going to be without Pacheco, it seems like. But they've got capable running backs. Pacheco's been questionable all week. If he plays, he's another capable part of the puzzle on the ground there. But they've got guys who are capable of burning the clock a little bit if they get out ahead. Not that KC tends to always take their foot off the gas. They do put up high scores even in games where they get out well ahead. Mahomes hasn't really gelled with a lot of these receivers, or they're just not that great and they keep dropping the ball on him. 7 drops in 2 games. Not great. So I'm kind of lukewarm on the KC play, especially if people are going to be there. What's up, D? D just walked in. A trade just opened some White Widow Crumble. I picked up, the reason I decided to run to the dispensary was because they had I can't really. This is not going to show up on camera. I can barely read it with my eyes. The fresh powder. It's a sativa that I got. It was only in one other time, and I really liked it. So they had it in stock, and I just ran over because their stock doesn't actually work. So you see something online, and it's not guaranteed to actually be there when you get there. Even if you like put it in your cart, place the order, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just like, screw it. Get an Uber. I got 3 hours. Get an Uber. Ran over there. It's like 10 minutes away in Secaucus. It's pretty convenient. So I grabbed a couple of those. Trey says they're going to unleash Justin Fields. I can get behind that. I will probably have some Fields. He's a player that I tend to get to. I do, like I said, I like the 3 receivers that he's working with. So I do think there's opportunity there, especially if like people aren't going to that spot. Anytime we're dealing with an explosive big play quarterback with rushing ability like that, who also happens to have weapons, I'll always have at least a little bit. Pot not legal wherever D's at. Well, one day probably soon. How about gambling, FanDuel, DraftKings, etc.? Oh, by the way, you guys see the stuff going on in Florida? Apparently, Underdog and a few other sites got cease and desist letters saying that their operations are illegal. FanDuel and DraftKings notably did not. Texas. Might be a minute, but you never know. You guys are very, free-spirited and, do states' rights the right way. So if a lot of people got behind it, it's a big agricultural state, too. It could probably be a pretty big cash crop down there. Although, it grows in Texas kind of climate. I would have to think that it would be pretty good for Texas to legalize. Maybe one day. What's the gambling status there, D? Does Texas have sports books? Anyway, I'll keep talking about this while D's typing. Always good to find out what's going on with everybody around the country, though. Especially if you travel. I'm going to be going to Texas sometime, I think this fall. Next fall, I mean. Either next fall or next spring. My cousin's getting married down there. Apparently, you drive from Dallas to Waco, which is like Waco's far outside Dallas, and then you just keep on going like several hours past Waco, just off into the desert. And that's where she grew up, so that should be fun. Only DFS, prize picks, yes. Okay. So no sports wagering, no sports book or anything. You guys have the track down there? You guys have have tracks, right? Pretty sure. Like racetracks? Dog racing? Pretty sure you guys have horse racing down there. So the KC side, like I said, obviously going to be there. Just by virtue of having to play some Mahomes and some Kelsey and, get involved with this. I think Jerick McKinnon, if Pacheco doesn't go, will step into a little bit larger of a role, and he's obviously involved in the passing game. So he's not uninteresting. He projects out kind of okay for the money. If I'm going to that offense, I would include him in my lineup builds and my stacks. Arizona's another one that, may have to just be throwing the ball a lot to keep up with Dallas on the other side. Dallas also favored by 13 points. Probably going to get up and run away with this one. Dak projects out really, really well on that side of the ball. So does Tony Pollard. So does CD. Brandon Cooks should be healthy and available. Michael Gallup's still there. Jake Ferguson is a decent tight end option. It's a lot to work with on the Dallas side of the ball. They all project out pretty well. One of the better spots on the board in the model here. On the Arizona side, you're working with Josh Dobbs, which is not the greatest start in the world. You do have Marquise Brown, not an uninteresting receiver. Zach Ertz, still semi-capable at tight end for very cheap. James Conner, a semi-capable running back. There's movable parts on the Arizona side. They're all very inexpensive, but it's not an ideal spot by any means. 48 points in the Denver-Miami game. No Jalen Waddle on this side of the ball, but that just kind of concentrates things for Tyreek Hill. And then we get the upside for like a Braxton Berrios, River Craycraft kind of a play. Raheem Mostert, obviously a playable piece. Really looks speedy out there, to put it in just simple terms. Looked really good the other day. So I like the Raheem Mostert spot a little bit, especially with the idea that, maybe that's just the concentrated offense. Just goes right here. It's also a good spot for tight ends. So Durham Smythe might get a look, especially with additional looks in the offense with no Waddle there. So it could be a decent spot for him. Only 2,900 on the DK slate. Not a bad tight end option. This one also may be interesting. Houston-Jacksonville, 44.5 points. Jacksonville favored by 8. But Houston's been frisky. CJ Stroud, Nico seem to have a connection. Tank Dell, Robert Woods, 2 decent receivers down the board a little bit. Both project out fairly well, especially for the money. Those are pretty decent prices, pretty decent projections for the money. Dalton Schultz, solid tight end option. So I don't think that Houston is necessarily out of things. 19th ranked pass defense for Jacksonville so far in terms of yards per pass attempt. Pretty decent against the run. So not the best spot to go to a Dameon Pierce kind of a look, a Devin Singletary. Not that those are running backs that I'm ever really looking to go to anyway. Jacksonville side I do like. I think there's a ton of talent on this team. A little bit more concentrated. Zay Jones is going to be out. I was on the Christian Kirk side of that combination last week. I wrote about it in the above below article. It was a featured head to head that I put in the middle of the column. And I was on the Christian Kirk side. He saw a monster target share, put up a good game. Now he'll be operating as the true number 2. So I like the spot for Kirk. Ridley is obviously a monster talent. Seems to be developing a connection with Lawrence, who is obviously another premium talent at quarterback. Travis Etienne getting most of the volume at running back. Very, very talented at his position. Evan Engram is a very solid tight end who projects fairly well. Like that. I like this game a decent amount. I like the Jacksonville side obviously better. But I think this one's good for premium, for prime stacks on both sides. And then for run back plays on both sides. I took the required run back out after people were asking about it a little bit last week. I decided to go back to what I used to do, which was just making it, available for the stacks, just saying in most cases. I think this game and then the Minnesota and the Chargers game, I left it as give me exactly one as a run back play, just because you expect a pretty high octane game in both of those. Both these teams are playing at a pretty advanced pace. Another game here with a star at the quarterback position that I'll always go to. I do think you could play Lamar on his own, but I typically would rather go to him and Mark Andrews or him and Zay Flowers. I don't know how much I want to get to like the Gus Edwards, Melvin Gordon timeshare. They also have Kenyon Drake on this team and elevated to their active roster now, so who the hell knows what's going on there. But Melvin Gordon hasn't been good in a minute, and Gus Edwards hasn't really been great this year so far. So I don't really love that spot. I'd rather go to the passing game here. No Odell, probably a bump to Zay Edwards. You don't have much more to work with, but there was some coach speak today about, hey, we're definitely going to Rashad Bateman. He's going to be involved. Expect him to get a lot of looks. What that means for Rashad Bateman, we'll see. Could be a day for Nelson Aguilar by the same token. Maybe they go to him at extreme value prices as long as it's not a baby falling out a window. Gardner Minshew in on the Indy side. I'm not really on board. I know he's had his moments. Working with Michael Pittman is obviously a plus. Going up against the 5th ranked pass defense with 4.8 yards per pass attempt so far. 12th ranked rush defense with 3.6 yards per rush attempt allowed so far. So I don't really expect a day for Zach Moss. I don't really expect a day for the Minshew-Pittman combination. Wouldn't knock me out of my chair with surprise if these guys connected a few times and had a decent day. But did they go out and win the slate? I don't know. Minshew's cheap. I'll give him that much. But I don't know. That one's stretching it to me. Premium option obviously is here. This is the big meatball I referred to at the top. 54.5 points. Close game. Minnesota favored by 1 at home. So very, very tight on the board in Vegas. Should be a shootout. Both teams have very capable receivers. Both teams have very capable quarterbacks. We're supposedly getting just focus on Alexander Madison this week. They picked up Cam Akers in the trade, but he's supposedly most likely not going to be active. And even if he is, a touch or two, very, very minimal involvement. So I think we're going to have a little bit of Alexander Madison to work with, and we're going to have plenty of Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson, Addison, who's gotten involved, KJ Osborne, who's been a little bit involved, but is, mediocre, but cheap, involved. I like going to those third receivers in his case, he's probably 4th on the in the pecking order when you include Hawkinson in that passing attack now. But especially with one that we expect to be slinging the ball around on both sides. High scoring game. you got to be willing to embrace these, these down the depth chart receivers a little bit. The realistic ones, the KJ Osborns. I'm not saying we're going down to Jalen Naylor here by any means, or Brandon Powell by any means. But the realistic guys, the guys who have already gotten looks this year, the guys who have produced in their career and so on and so forth, especially when they're at good prices in these large field tournaments, these are the options that can differentiate a Kirk Cousins stack. These are the options that could be the second man in, Cousins, Hawkinson, and a KJ. Cousins, Hawkinson, and an Addison will probably be decently lower owned. Obviously, you want many, many versions of Cousins and Jefferson. And then on the other side, Keenan Allen, 1, Mike Williams, 1A. I mean, primo options on both. Keenan's getting more of the focus, but Williams is right there with him, and they're both premium talents. Quentin Johnston, not gotten involved a ton, but seems like a talented kid. Joker's just said like he's just yakking on a bone kind of moment from Christmas Vacation. He just hacked something up down there. He just ate his dinner before. Well done, buddy. It's Quentin Johnston I like. Gerald Everett, meh. Playable part at tight end. He's not expensive. But the priorities I think are at the wide receiver position on the Charger side of things. Not breaking any new ground there. But I think, regardless of how popular that game's going to be, there's pretty good reason to go there. Just focus on some differentiation when you do. Put it together with lower owned things in different games if you're going to the Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson combination. Trey says Osborne, if he's low owned, been getting snaps. Yeah, we're going to look at the game by game, position by position like usual. I just wanted to do like a kind of a summary at the top, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing. We'll make this shit up as we go along. New England and the Jets. I don't really love this game. Vegas doesn't really love this game. A 36-point total. Jets 2.5-point dogs at home. Mac Jones has been okay, but doesn't really project out great. Jets defense is still good. Regardless of what happened with Aaron Rodgers, the Jets D is still pretty good. So I don't know how much I want to get to Mac Jones. Ramondre Stevenson, maybe a little bit, but they've been 9th, allowing 3.5 yards per rush attempt, 10th against the pass, 5.9 yards per pass attempt. They were projected to be the second best defense by DVOA. So, or arguably, underperforming by a little bit in terms of the yardage, but they've been pretty stout in terms of their defense. It's the offense that really suffers, which leads us to Zach Wilson, Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Garrett Wilson, obviously at the top of the board there for the Jets. I think you can play Garrett Wilson. I kind of prefer just saying like, all right, Garrett Wilson is a floating one-off. I'm not going to get to Zach Wilson stacks. How many times do you need to roll this slate before Zach Wilson beats you? I think it's a pretty significant number. The Pats, not great. 18th against the pass, 6.3 yards per pass attempt. 20th against the run, 4.4 yards per rush attempt. There's opportunity there, but pretty ugly. Breece and Dalvin, Breece getting the lion's share of the work. Pretty talented back. You can maybe work him in, but just the fact that Dalvin's there, that Dalvin's getting looks in the red zone is not ideal for Breece. It could easily be a situation where he gives you 80 yards but doesn't get in the end zone because Dalvin got the ball and got in the end zone, which sucks. The rest of that offense I don't really like at all, especially, again, in such a low total game. I just really don't see much need to go there. More interesting one here. Derek Carr's been throwing the ball. He's obviously got some very good targets to work with in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Michael Thomas. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position now that Rashid Shaheed's taken a step forward. Thomas is clearly, not completely diminished, let's put it that way. 85% of what he once was. Who knows what it actually is. Kendry Miller should be the focus back here. Got to give this, I think, a little bit of a nudge. But really like the idea of Carr and a mix and match of these receivers. Going up against just a mid-ranked pass defense right now, 6.1 yards per pass attempt, lands 15th for Green Bay. Green Bay, I don't love. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. He got me. All right. Let me reset. Green Bay, I'm not overly enthralled with the idea of going to the Green Bay stack. Jordan Love has been good up top, but the Saints pass defense is pretty good. 4th-ranked pass defense so far. They were projected to be the 6th-ranked defense overall by DVOA, and they've been delivering 4.8 yards per pass attempt. They've given up 5 yards per rush attempt on the ground. Maybe it's a day where you could look to Aaron Jones if he's back, confirmed, fully healthy. He's still currently questionable. Got a couple practices in. Jake Swales says he loves Akers on the Vikings. Madison is cooked. Yeah, Madison hasn't been really delivering, so it'll be interesting once Akers gets suited up. But as Craig points out, most likely not going to suit up. Might suit up, might get a couple touches. They haven't, or at least last I saw, hadn't officially confirmed one way or the other. But they had said earlier in the week that he was leaning toward him not going. I think Jake probably means just going forward as an option in that offense. I just like that offense in general. I had Kirk Cousins way ahead week 1. And Cousins has been great. We'll talk about it in just a second. But Cousins has been really, really good. He's leading the league in passing right now. And that's despite turnovers, pretty key turnovers in both games so far. So he could have been even better on a less unlucky, less unfortunate day. Anyway, Jordan Love, I don't love the passing attack. Damn it, I did it again. I am not infatuated with the passing attack. Christian Watson's still questionable. Practiced once, but missed practices on both sides of that. Seems like he's probably not going to go. Probably going to end up taking him out of projections tonight if he doesn't already get confirmed out. And then you're dealing with like Luke Musgrave, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, who's been interesting in minimal involvement. It's a pretty limited option going up against a very good defense. So I don't really want to get to too much Green Bay. And then Cleveland and Tennessee. We kind of started off talking about Deshaun Watson. 38.5 points, not the biggest total on the board. 3-point favorite. Should be close. I could easily see this game, if it wasn't for the Chubb injury, just being like a slugfest, ground and pound, Derrick Henry against Chubb kind of a game. Since we don't really have that now on the Cleveland side, Jerome Ford's going to get some action. Kareem Hunt probably get out there for a few touches. I might end up lowering the projections, giving him a few fewer overall touches. But I want to see what the coach speak looks like going into tonight. I haven't done a ton of deep dive around some notes around specific players like this, but I don't think that's completely unrealistic for Kareem Hunt if he is out there and involved. So we'll see what happens with that projection overnight. But right now, looking like he's going to be out there a little bit. Elijah Moore hasn't been great. Amari Cooper, very, very good option. Ford, if he's getting full touches, I don't dislike for the cheap price. And Deshaun, like I said, any quarterback with at least a track record of talent through the air and the ability to run the ball, I'm always going to be into at least a little bit. And I like the Watson-Amari Cooper combination when it's working. Njoku hasn't been great, but I don't ever mind going to him as a tight end that people don't seem to like to go to, who should see some looks in the red zone. I don't love the other options. Elijah Moore, inconsistent but talented. Donovan Peoples-Jones, meh. On this side, it's the Derrick Henry show for me, really. DeAndre's questionable. Treylon not been great. Chig not been great. Tannehill not throwing the ball all that much. I really don't like the passing attack here. Cleveland's also good defensively. 4th ranked, 3.2 yards per rush attempt. 3rd ranked, 4.3 yards through the air so far. Again, 2 weeks, but they've been pretty stout against the pass. I'd rather just take my shots with Derrick Henry if I have to go to that side. And he projects out okay. He's Derrick Henry. He's going to project out okay against basically anybody. Tennessee's D, stout against the run. Funnels it to the pass, weak against the pass. 29th ranked, 7.6 yards per pass attempt. So the 2.7 yards per rush attempt doesn't really bode well for the Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt combination here anyway. Rob F. says it's a prove-it game for Watson. Yeah, it's not untrue. Got to show us something. I do think it's a game where he could finally, find his form, hit his stride, even if it's just for 1 week. I think it's a spot where he's just going to have a lot of opportunity to throw the ball and against a pretty weak defense. So I think there's upside there. And again, a player that I've already gotten 2 weeks 1 and 2. I'm certainly not going to go away from in 150 lineups for week 3 here. So let's get into it a little bit. A lot to discuss. I wasn't fully planning on breaking down the entire slate and fast forward there at the beginning, but we'll get deeper. I could just do this as we went to each position instead of in advance. Oh, I did this too. I forgot. I haven't put this up on the site yet, but I just ranked out the stacks. I took the quarterback and his top 3 scoring options, whether that's 2 wideouts in the tight end, 3 wideouts, 2 wideouts in the running back, etc., etc. And I totaled them up and I ranked them. So just kind of a top stacks board. So that's what that is right now. I'll give you a chance to absorb that. I'll find a spot for it on the site. But just to break it down, Dallas up top by FanDuel points, second by DK points. Minnesota first by DK points, second on FanDuel. Chargers on the other side of that game. Fourth ranked by FanDuel points, third ranked by DK points, second by value, first by points per dollar. Some of them are a little bit skewed by high-priced running backs being included in terms of how the values look. But a lot of the teams we just talked about, a lot of the higher octane teams. This hasn't been course-corrected for the Waddle absence. Miami will probably drop a little bit. But a lot of the upside spots that I mentioned, like Jacksonville against Houston I like Buffalo. I still like Miami. And then these 3 teams, Dallas, Minnesota, and the Chargers. I like those spots, and you can see how KC just ranks 7th, 9th by FanDuel value, point per dollar, 6th by DK, point per dollar. Still on the board, still worth going to. Just don't really love Mahomes' receivers outside of Kelsey this year. Baltimore, a lot of value showing through on the FanDuel slate, less so on the DK board. You can see the relative price difference. 23 versus, high 3s. That's because it's Lamar, one expensive receiver, a mid tight end, and then somebody cheap. Lot to work with down to like the Seattle level. I think there's playable parts on a lot of these teams, like obviously Derrick Henry from Tennessee. You can get some playable parts from Atlanta. Obviously, we were just talking about Cleveland. We like that spot a little bit. They rank 4th by DK value as a stack. Pretty good option there. Playable parts from the New Orleans offense for sure, just given the way they've been throwing the ball and the talent at receiver. Trey's about to put on some cinnamon rolls. Ooh, damn, that sounds good. If the scent of cinnamon rolls came like wafting through here in like 20 minutes, first of all, you guys would be looking at an empty chair for about a minute and a half while I went and grabbed some. Second of all, I'd be wondering who the hell was making cinnamon rolls in my kitchen because I'm the only one that lives here. But damn, that would be good. So let's take a look at this game off the top before the entire show goes by and this slate starts. An okay projection for Jared Goff, but ranks 13th on the board by DK points. Desmond Ridder on the other side, 20th. There are workable options here, but I think we probably prefer the ground game. A little Bijan, a little Jameer maybe. Jameer not that expensive. 4th by DK points, 4th by DK value. 4th and 3rd on the FanDuel slate. Going up against the 2nd ranked yards per rush attempt defense. Pretty challenging spot there. Might be questioning that projection a little bit. So 48% of the snaps, 38% of the snaps on average. 7 rush attempts per game. 29.5 yards. Does a lot of work through the air. So that's where he's getting a decent amount of his projection. So far seeing 5.5 targets a game. I think he saw 9 last week. 6.3 yards per catch. Hasn't gotten in the end zone through the air yet. But he's picking up some value there in that projection for sure. That's where we're getting out ahead on the DK side too. The points per dollar. Or points per reception rather. So some interesting options. Bijan obviously premium talent at running back. Priced around that level at this point already. 9,000 on FanDuel, 7,800 on the DK board. Does still rank out pretty well though, points per dollar. The price not really impacting him. 72% of the snaps last time out, 69% on average, running the ball 14.5 times a game, putting up 90 yards a game, 6.2 yards per rush attempt. He's dynamite before contact, dynamite after contact. He's been very, very good so far. 21-yard long. I think it's probably that one that we've all seen the replay of probably 30 times already. Pretty slick run. Targeted twice in the red zone. He's got a receiving touchdown already, seeing 5.5 targets a game, so he's involved in the passing game as well. You do have Tyler Algier getting involved in the rushing game as well, though. 44% of the snaps last week, 49% on average, 15.5 rush attempts per game. They're getting him the ball a little bit. So you do have that concern. He's run the ball in twice. You do have that concern a little bit. 2.9 yards after contact. He's a capable runner. He had a very good year last year for them. So there is the concern that Algier gets the touchdown, poaches the touchdown away from Bijan. Craig Reynolds, a capable guy on the other side of this one. Not a bad projection for a $4,400 running back, $5,700 on the DK board, or on the FanDuel board rather. 25th ranked point per dollar on DK, 31st ranked point per dollar on FanDuel. You could easily see Craig Reynolds in a day where he's stepping into the David Montgomery role. You could easily see him putting the ball in the end zone, if nothing else. So definitely a opportunity for him. At the price, not bad. There's not much to work with statistically. 15% of the snaps so far. 2.3 yards per rush attempt this season. In the past, you jump to, where is he? In 2021, 55 carries, 230 yards. It was 4.2 yards per rush attempt, 4.4 yards per rush attempt on just 23 carries in 9 games last year. Hasn't seen a ton of action. Not much through the air. 8 targets and 10 targets. Caught 7 of them, caught 9 of them. So just hasn't had much opportunity, but does seem to have a little bit of talent. So I wouldn't rule him out for cheap shares. Not a guy you're going to focus on. But if you need a cheapo running back, guy who's probably going to touch the ball a fair amount of times, definitely some opportunity there. But I like the idea of Gibbs now that he's the focus back, cheap. Again, going up against the defense that has been good against the run. So that's a bit of an issue, but the projection's supporting it right now. Look back to the passing game real quick. So Goff, 35 pass attempts per game, definitely has been throwing the ball a little bit, thrown 4 touchdowns. Only 5.4 air yards per attempt, but gaining 8.2 yards per pass attempt overall, 7.5 intended air yards per attempt. On the other side, Ritter, not gaining much in terms of air yards, not gaining much in terms of intended air yards, only thrown 2 touchdowns, 176 yards a game, only throwing the ball 25 times a game. Not a tremendous amount of volume in this passing attack for Atlanta, but there's a little bit of talent. Let's sort this by. Between Drake London and Kyle Pitts, at the very least, there's definitely talent here. 18% of the targets for London, 16.7% for Pitts. London got shut out in the first game, if I'm not mistaken. 3 catches, he's got a touchdown, 22.3 yards per game, not a ton, but putting up 7.44 yards per target. Pitts, 7.38. Mac Hollins giving us the most yards per target on 20% of the volume. 11-yard ADOT, 9.1 yards per target. Seeing 5 targets a game. Playing 71% of the snaps last week, 68% the week before. Jonnu, as the second tight end, you get pretty weak down here. So it's really a 2.5-man show. Hollins not out there for a ton of volume. Some more on the Drake London side of things. If I'm going to this offense, I like him better. Just, go to him as a one-off receiver. I don't know how many Ritter stacks I really want. It's probably not many. Detroit side, Amon-Ra's, last I saw, questionable. We got an update on him. Let me just find him here. See if there's any late breaking news. Still questionable. Toe injury. He practiced all week. I feel like he's going to play. If he plays, he's obviously a premium option. 7,900 on both sites. Projects out very, very well. Wide receiver 7 by fantasy points on FanDuel. 14th by FanDuel value. 6th on DK. Slipped by points per dollar. I'm going to check that. 7,900. Yeah, I guess relative price. So, low rank points per dollar, but obviously one of the highest projected overall receivers. Josh Reynolds, been involved a little bit, seeing 80% of the snaps last week, 75% the week before. 4.5 catches a game on 7 targets, 19.7% of the target share. Sam Laporta, their tight end, also been involved. Ranks as tight end 6 on FanDuel, tight end 6 by points on DK, 11 by points per dollar, 6 by points per dollar on the FanDuel slate. Also drawing 16.7% of the targets. He's seeing... I put too much in here at this point. Red zone targets wise, Amon-Ra seeing 2, but Reynolds has seen 1, Laporta's seen 1, Marvin Jones seen 1. I don't know how much we really expect from Marvin Jones at this point, though. 52% of the snaps, 8 yards a game, 3 targets a game, not really involved, only 9.1% of the target share, only running a minimal amount of routes, so not all that much. 1.33 yards per target, even smaller, I would imagine, on yards per route run. Nothing really to work with at the bottom of the board or worry about. Khalif Raymond, a mix-in, just the same kind of caliber of as Marvin Jones here, I think. He's seeing 42% of the snaps, 35% on average. 2 targets a game, 5.2% of the volume. He has at least a little bit of a downfield option. 17.5 yard ADOT with a 16.5 yards per target so far. So if they're looking downfield, which they'll have the opportunity to do, he'll be involved a little bit. I like him better as your cheap dart throw than I like Marvin Jones. Projects out a little bit better. So really kind of limited on the Atlanta side. I like my opportunities in the passing game for Detroit. Again, going up against the... oh, that's what I screwed up before. I was looking at the wrong side of this. That's why Gibbs projects out. Got to catch up with this board a little bit. Atlanta's 22nd against the run, 4.5. I was looking at the wrong side. They're second against the pass, 4.2%, 4.2 yards per pass attempt, 4.5 yards per rush attempt. So that's what's supporting Gibbs' upside in the run. We've got it figured. So Goff going up against a good pass defense, but a lot to work with in that passing game. So I don't mind that spot. Projects out fairly well. What was he in the rankings? Yeah, middle of the board, 13th. Oops. Buffalo and Washington. All right, let's get this right this time. Buffalo going up against the 24th ranked rush defense, 4.5 yards per rush attempt, 17th against the pass, 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Supports a lot of upside for the Buffalo offense. At the same time, it's not like the Bills have been great on defense. They're supposed to be good on defense, projected as the number 1 defense by DVOA right now, giving up a 30th ranked 5.3 yards per rush attempt, 6.6 yards through the air, 20th ranked. That hasn't been great. Not that we're really leaning into the Sam Howell idea here. Brian Robinson maybe a little bit more viable on the ground. Terry McLaurin is a good receiver. John Dotson is a decent receiver. Antonio Gibson can get involved a little bit from the out of the backfield through the air. Curtis Samuel, I think, is playing after being questionable most of the week, so a third banana in the offense. They're without their tight end, so you get John Bates and Cole Turner kind of splitting the baby at tight end. I've got it more going to Bates, but that's just because that's the way I put it. It could easily have gone the other direction. I don't really think you look to tight end on the Washington side. The Bills' defense, a lot more straightforward. We kind of know where the options are. Getting into the numbers. Allen second on the board on the DK slate and on FanDuel. 8th by value, 6th by value. DK FanDuel. Sam Howell, just not really a quarterback we're looking to get invested in. Doesn't project out great, even for the money. 18th by point per dollar, 17th on FanDuel. Throwing the ball 35 times a game, there is a little bit of volume there. 250 yards, 3 touchdowns so far. He's thrown a pick, but on the other side, Josh Allen, 4 touchdowns, but thrown 3 interceptions, which is high. I think a couple of them, if I remember what I was watching. A little bit unlucky. A couple deflected balls that got picked off. Kevin O stopping by to hit the like and get a steal in NFL. Love it, buddy. Dennis Forgy, you need to clone yourself like Michael Keaton. One of you could be making the cinnamon rolls on Walking Joker, and the other could be doing the show. I like it. Yeah, the neat and tidy Michael Keaton probably makes a mean cinnamon roll, too. They did end up opening up a pizza shop, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of that movie, right? So we're obviously going to Josh Allen here. We know he's crazy talented. Running for 4.5, running the ball 4.5 times a game, 43 rush yards so far. Hasn't rushed the ball into the end zone. Sam Howell's got a rushing touchdown, but only 24 yards, 6 yards per rush attempt so far, 2 attempts a game. Not really looking to Sam Howell to be a major weapon at the quarterback position. So I think we're going to Josh Allen. We're obviously going to his passing attack. Stephon Diggs, an absolute beast up top, 87% of the snaps, 26.7% target share, 8.4 yards per target with an 8.5 yard ADOT. Gabe Davis, his ADOT's not coming. He's probably Gabriel in that stacks board. I gotta fix that. But 14.7% of the targets, gaining 11.27 yards per target, and he's their downfield threat. So he's got a good ADOT. We can find it real quick. Which board is that on? It's the one thing I didn't take the time to do is build out the naming table. So 13.3 yard ADOT for Gabe Davis. Like I said, they're downfield guy. Beyond that, it's really the 2 wideouts and then the 2 tight ends. Kincaid and Knox both seeing a fair amount of the snaps. 60% of the snaps last week for Kincaid, 71% that week for Knox. On average, 69 and 77 across the 2 games. 13 and 12% of the targets, 5 targets a game each. Red zone target-wise, they're both getting looks in the red zone. 2 for Kincaid, 3 for Knox. Outside of Stephon Diggs, they lead in red zone targets. So it's like clear number 1, downfield weapon, and then split the difference between the 2 tight ends. You mix and match them. I don't think you're playing both tight ends in any lineups. You're not going tight end and util spot. But I think either one of these guys capable enough. They're kind of splitting a good tight end projection between the 2 of them pretty fairly. Knox the more familiar weapon, Kincaid the highly drafted, highly touted rookie. Deontay Hardy, 19% of the snaps last week, only drawing 9.3% of the targets, not giving us much. He would be the 3rd option in the wide receiver position, but we're already getting pretty limited. So I like the 2 tight ends. I like the wideouts. And then on the ground, I was like, wait a minute. On the ground, Cook ranks out okay. 12th on DK, 13th on FanDuel by points, mid-teens on both sites by value, seeing 59% of the snaps. Damian Harris seeing 16%, 18%. Latavius Murray, 23% of the snaps. Yards per rush attempt, 5.8, putting up 84.5 yards per game, 14.5 carries. Pretty solid. 3.7 yards after contact. In the passing game, seeing 5 targets a game, coming up with 6.6 yards per catch. Pretty solid option, especially if he's going to be involved in the passing attack. Projects out fairly well. Projects out all right for the money. Kind of a mid-range value option. But a good running back. I would involve him in Buffalo stacks. Maybe with like an ownership cap of like how much in stacks do I want to get to. So that might require like dashing off like 100 lineups that where you just lock Josh Allen and captain, allow him to be in the groups. I tend to go away from the running backs unless they're fairly heavily involved in the passing game, but he's been involved enough. So I think he qualifies for that. Harrison Murray probably just, very low end touchdown dependent dart throws. They've each got one on the board. Can't take those away from him. I mean, Cook doesn't have a rushing touchdown yet. That's annoying. It's been the case in Buffalo for years with the running game. There's always just multiple options might get the touchdown, and it becomes frustrating. So James Cook might just be that guy now. But let's hope not. On the Washington side, Brian Robinson, I do think he's going to be handling the ball a decent amount. Seeing 18.5 rush attempts per game, 3.9 yards per rush attempt. He's put the ball in the end zone twice. Gaining 2 yards before contact, 1.9 yards after contact. He's broken 4 tackles, a long of 27. getting targeted a little bit, not overly involved in the passing game because they've got Antonio Gibson to fill that role, but 2.5 targets a game. He's got a receiving touchdown on one red zone target. Not uninvolved in the passing game, and probably is the better part of that offense this week. I do think he's playable at 5,800, 7,500. 19th ranked by FanDuel value, 12th by value on DK. On the board more on the DK slate for 58. Gibson, I don't think there's a ton to support the play. 3.6 yards per rush attempt, but only carrying the ball 2.5 times a game. A little bit more involved when it comes to the pass game, 2 targets a game, but that's not exactly tremendous volume. So I don't really see that one. In the passing attack, McLaurin's super, super talented. Does project out okay, but only 20th by points. Mid-20s into the 30s on FanDuel by value. Same thing for Jahan Dotson. Projects out lower, a little bit higher for points per dollar because he's cheap, 4,900, 5,800 across sites. So maybe a little bit of Jahan Dotson as like a value receiver. He's seen 86% of the snaps on average. McLaurin's seen 81%. McLaurin's putting up seeing 5 targets a game. A little bit more volume so far for Dotson, 19% of the target share, 6 targets a game. I mean, it's not exactly a tremendous difference. We're getting 8.5 yards per target on a 10.7 yard ADOT from McLaurin, a little bit more downfield where Dotson's working like in the mid-range, and then Curtis Samuel on a 4.9 yard ADOT, primarily working out of the slot, primarily working near the line of scrimmage. Doesn't project like a huge option, but also a guy who's for the cheap pricing, 37.57. If you're going to look at this game, if you're stacking Buffalo and you need a super cheap guy on the other side, and you say, I definitely want to have a run back play here, Curtis Samuel's not the craziest option in the world. He projects out okay. It's not a good option, but seeing 63% of the snaps, seeing 4 targets a game, 12.7% of the overall targets. It's just that he doesn't do a ton with them. But he's minimally on the board in a passing attack that I don't really want to get to. The tight ends, not so much. Carolina, Seattle. Like I said, I like the Seattle side of this one. Carolina's been decent against the pass, 8th ranked, 5.4 yards per pass attempt, giving up 21st ranked, 4.5 yards per rush. Carolina, 3rd ranked, only 2.9 yards per rush attempt, Seattle, only 2.9 yards per rush attempt. I think basically stifles the Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard idea. Leaves us in the hands of Andy Dalton if we want to go to the Carolina offense. They have been 30th ranked, giving up 8.9 yards per pass attempt so far. Seattle. It could turn into a little bit of a shootout between Geno and Andy Dalton. I greatly prefer the Geno side. I like his weapons better. So, dicey for the running game. Better opportunity for the running game for Kenny Walker. He does have Charbonnet there, but seems to be the focus back. We'll start there. Walker, 11th projected, 10th on FanDuel. Moderate ranking for points per dollar, seeing 62% of the snaps, 14.5 carries a game. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns already. Only 0.9 yards per rush attempt after contact, 2.8 yards before contact. Very low after contact. I don't know what that ranks, but that's low. So many places are so into ranks here, ranks there. I put some rank, just to talk about defense in terms of where they stack up. But especially after 2 games, it's so weird to be talking about they're the 12th ranked defense, and it's separated by 0.2 yards per rush attempt from the 28th ranked defense. So football stats are so small sample, so weird to work with. Larry slacking. What's Larry doing? Larry's late. Start watching at 1.5 times speed. Yeah, we haven't gone that far yet, Larry. You missed a quick breakdown of the entire slate from the top, just kind of looking at some of the teams and the totals and where the general plays are, and now we're just kind of getting into the numbers, doing the deep dive. Handful of people here hanging out. More people tend to watch this one, I think, not live necessarily. Probably watch the replay, probably at high speed. All I ask of them is hit the like button when you're listening, whatever point you're listening at. A lot of people here just saying hi, dropping by, hitting the like button, which I appreciate. Zach Charbonnet, minimally playable, seeing 25% of the snaps, 3.5 rush attempts per game, not really doing very much. Kid that they spent a decent draft pick on and expected to be a little bit involved in this offense. You could conceivably even lower this projection. Not an ideal spot. Miles Sanders, the key, focused back in their backfield, 59% of the snaps, 16 rush attempts per game, 3.6 yards per rush attempt. Yet to put the ball in the end zone, 2.2 yards before contact, 1.4 yards after. Not ideal. Chuba Hubbard's been dominating in terms of the yards after contact when it comes to these running backs. 4.6 yards after contact. Only running the ball 5.5 times per game. And going up against a defense that, again, has been kind of stuffing the run. Don't really like the opportunity for Chuba or Miles Sanders here. But I do think we can go to some Kenny Walker. They've been giving up the yardage. Decent opportunity to chew up this defense a little bit. So I don't hate that. I don't hate that spot. The fact that he's gotten in the end zone a couple times already. He's been 3.5 targets a game, so a little bit involved in the passing attack. So I think you can include Kenny Walker in your stacks with Geno, with DK, with Tyler Lockett, with Jackson. Not as much Zach Charbonnet. I probably wouldn't put him into the groups for stacks. I would let him fall as a value running back if I got him in a lineup that wasn't a Seattle stack and just had him as a cheapo running back. I'd be okay with that. Not the ideal play, again, because limited snaps, limited volume, but not the craziest thing in the world to think that he could break one off, have a decent play, maybe put one in the end zone. No Will Dissly at the tight end position, so a little bit of a bump to Noah Fant, who can be productive from time to time in the passing game. But I think we all know in this pass attack, we primarily just want the wide receivers. DK and Tyler chew up most of the volume, 88 and 87% of the snaps. The clear 1-1A, 18% of the targets going Metcalf's way, 23% going Tyler Lockett's way. Another 18% have gone to Jackson Smith and Jigba, only seeing 57% of the overall snaps. 4 catches a game, though. Only putting up 6 yards per target. That's actually similar to the other two guys. In terms of the looks in the red zone, 3 of them have gone Metcalf's way. 4 of them have gone to Lockett. Only 1 to Jackson. Not yet trusted in the red zone, it seems. Also not seeing much in terms of an ADOT, 2.3 yard ADOT, just kind of working in short patterns around the line of scrimmage. DK working downfield, 13.1 yard ADOT, and then Lockett at 8.5 yards. Getting only 5.6 yards per catch out of Lockett so far. But premium option for volume. He's put the ball in the end zone twice. Metcalf's gotten in once. Working with a capable quarterback. Can't believe in the year 2023 that that's something I say about Geno Smith, but it's true. Had a good year last year. Putting up 220 yards a game. He's thrown 3 touchdowns, 6.6 yards per pass attempt. Only 5.8 intended air yards per attempt so far. Hasn't been really airing it out, but they should have the opportunity to here. Andy Dalton, no numbers to work with from this year. We looked at minimal numbers from last year real quick. Pull up something to... Surely there's something we can say about Andy. Let's see. Let me get to last year's numbers. That one. And that guy. Last season, Andy gave us... played 14 games through 378 passes. 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 9 picks, 7.6 yards per pass attempt with New Orleans. Working with better receivers, probably. Better than DJ Shark, Adam Thielen at this point in his career, Jonathan Mingo as a rookie. Yeah, I'm going to say working with better receivers last year when he had an okay production. The yards per pass attempt is decent. The 18 touchdowns is decent, but 14 games. 18 touchdowns in 14 games, not overly great. Got sacked 25 times. Obviously doesn't run the ball. Yeah, I don't think even for value that we look to Andy. It's only 49 on the DK slate, only 62 on FanDuel. Still doesn't rank out well given that super, super low projection. Basically projected for half of what Pat Mahomes is. Not ideal. And he limits the upside of a DJ Shark, of an Adam Thielen. They project out okay for the money because they're both cheap at 3,800, 3,900, 5,600, 5,700. So they're like playable parts, but very minimal projections given what they're working with at quarterback. 62% of the snaps for DJ Shark. Only seeing 1.6% of the targets so far. I forgot to fix his name, so we don't have his A dot. DJ missed the first week. Thielen drawing 88% of the snaps. Mingo's played 92% of the snaps on average, played 98% even with DJ back last week. 7 targets per game, 21% of the volume. Hasn't put one in the end zone yet, but a 14.8 yard A dot for Mingo. If you're going to Andy Dalton, I mean, I do think you have 3 playable receivers to work with here and a playable tight end. Hurst seeing a 16.1% target share. He's gotten the ball in the end zone already through the air. 5 targets a game. Has seen 1 red zone target. Thielen got the other one. He got it in the end zone. I just don't really like the opportunity here. So very limited on this side. If you're looking for run back plays, I'd probably rather go to the pass attack than the rushing attack, though, from Carolina. So I think if you want to take a shot back the other way against a Seattle stack to correlate with it, I think you're probably looking... Adam Thielen, I would have to say, is my favorite play here. I guess Thielen, Shark, Mingo. Becomes dicey, though, with DJ. Trusting DJ Shark at all becomes difficult for me. Thielen probably my favorite option in that Carolina attack. Talked about the rushing game. Talked briefly about the quarterbacks. Geno, again, obviously in play. Fairly priced on both sides. Projects out decently well. Projects out better for value than he does for fantasy points overall. And has played well. So I like the spot there. Chicago and Kansas City. We'll just do this as we go. So Justin Fields, I mean, the projection's fairly good. The price is certainly right. Where does he project in terms of 8th on the board by DK price, 13th by value, 8th and 9th on FanDuel. Mahomes, 3rd by DK points, 11th by point per dollar, 3rd and 8th on FanDuel. Just keep checking for news as things pop up on my phone. Everybody chooses to text me while I'm on shows. It's weird. As if they know. They might. I don't know. Come on, mouse. Bear with me, the mouse died. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. That note brought to you by Logitech. Logitech for shitty wireless mouses and keyboards that disconnect from your computer at all the wrong times. I do think both of these quarterbacks are playable. Mahomes just not great in terms of the points per dollar, and it's largely compared to where some of the other quarterbacks project, rather than saying he doesn't project well. He obviously projects very well. 22 points on either site. Love the upside. I just don't really love the weapons that he's working with outside of Kelsey this year. I actually like the receivers that Fields has a little bit better, oddly. But obviously, Fields is no Patrick Mahomes. 213.5 yards a game on 33 pass attempts. Mahomes throwing the ball a lot more, 40 attempts a game, 265.5 yards. He's thrown 4 touchdowns, despite not really gelling with his receivers. 2 picks. Fields has thrown 3 already. 6.6 yards per pass attempt, 6.5 yards, so they're relatively close there. Intended air yards is a big separation. Fields just kind of working short passes, 4.5 intended air yards per attempt. Has yet to throw the ball beyond 30 yards. And Mahomes has been just victimized by those 7 drops in 2 games. It's just brutal. 4 touchdowns on 9 red zone attempts. In terms of the rushing game, Mahomes technically outrunning him with 5.8 yards per rush attempt. Rush yards per attempt. 5.8 yards per rush attempt on 6.5 yards. Same volume so far. I think we like Fields a little bit better in terms of the running game, though. Fields has run one into the end zone. He's got that upside of if they're close to the goal line, I think a little bit more than Pat Mahomes does. So I think you go to Fields. You trust that the passing will come around. He was spotty last year in terms of the passing, but he had his monster days where he's running, he's throwing, the throws are working out. I definitely think for DFS purposes, he's on the board. Are you as confident starting him in a weekly? Probably not, but I think he's probably still your quarterback number one, like he is for me in a couple leagues. Had him offered to me to trade him away in one of our leagues that some of the people in the chat might be in. Probably not going to do it. Didn't like the offer. Daniel Jones and a bunch of garbage. That's from our pal Illegal Form Nation. And he's an Orioles fan. Ugh. So, Patty Mahomes, again, premium option, but the targets that he's got to work with, there's the monster in Kelsey at the tight end position. Number one ranked tight end, I'm sure. Yep, top of the tight end board on both sites. No surprise for Travis Kelsey. 7,200 on DK, 8,000 on the FanDuel board. Touchdown already this season. 11.7% of the targets so far. They spread the ball around. Nobody drawing like an immense target share. 13% so far for Kadarius Toney of all people is the high, but he only plays 27% of the snaps. They spread around the opportunities. They spread around the snaps, the targets. Obviously, the two backup tight ends, a lot less involved in the passing game with Travis Kelsey back last week. Sky Moore, 64% of the snaps on average, 58% last week. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 73% on average, 82% last week to lead the team. The deep threat on the team, 14.6 yard ADOT. 3 targets a game, 6.5% of the volume. So it's just, hey, we're going to take a shot downfield, call Marquez's number. That's basically what he's doing out there. 34-yard long. No red zone targets. Where are the red zone targets? It's just 3 for Kelsey already. 2 for Moore, 2 for Toney. 1 for Rashee Rice. 1 for Blake Bell in that first game. Rice and Bell put theirs, I believe those were both on those red zone targets in the end zone. Very limited options down this way. I do think you can maybe in super large field contests throw in some Rice, some Watson. 4 targets a game, 5 targets a game. Again, they're spreading the volume around. The kids have shown a little bit of talent. So there's options, if nothing else, to work with. And they're all cheap because there's not a lot of clear individual upside in that Kansas City passing attack. In terms of the depth of target, 24.6 yard ADOT for Justin Watson on a few looks. 2 games, 5 targets a game, 11.7% of the volume, giving us 11.89 yards per target, 19 yards per air yards per catch. So obviously another downfield weapon. Ross in limited action. Only 1 target in his 1 game. So it's like Rashee Rice, Justin Watson behind the other 3 wide receivers. I don't know. I wish they would make it a little bit more clear cut. Hopefully going forward, these guys kind of determine a little bit more of a pecking order, and it becomes a little bit more clear cut. Especially when this guy drops the ball all the time, he's only out there for limited shares, so he's difficult to play for DFS. This guy only sees a few targets a game, where he's, he might put up one of those games where he takes 2 balls for 114 yards and has a day. But he might not get any looks at all. He might not catch any balls at all. It's just a frustrating offense overall in terms of everybody other than Travis Kelsey and Pat Mahomes. Even in the ground game. When you look to the ground game with Kansas City, you've got a capable receiver. You've got Pacheco, who's been banged up. 49% of the snaps on average for Pacheco, 32% for McKinnon. CEH drawing away 19%. 4.7 rush yards per attempt on 10 rushing attempts per game for Pacheco. It's not really an overly playable running back. I also haven't dinged him for being questionable, potentially not playing in this one. And now the keyboard craps out. Thank you, Logitech. Send me free shit. I'll talk nicely about your products if you send me a free keyboard and a mouse. Somebody out there works for Logitech, right? Our audience is big enough that we've definitely got Logitech employees in it. In the passing game, 3 targets a game for Pacheco, 2.5 for McKinnon, who is allegedly the more involved, passing attack guy, and then a target and a half so far for CEH. It's just murky outside of Travis Kelce and Pat Mahomes. It's just murky who's ever going to get involved, who's ever going to be seeing the volume. I like the upside for McKinnon. If Pacheco doesn't go, then I think there's a little bit more daylight for McKinnon. But you'll probably see CEH get a decent chunk of those carries and snaps. On this side, Khalil Herbert, Rashawn Johnson, splitting the action a little bit. 60% of the snaps became more Herbert's job last week. 42% last week for Rashawn Johnson. On average, it's 46-40. Not a ton of rushing attempts per game anyway. Only 8 per game for Herbert, 4.5 for Rashawn Johnson. Putting up 3.9 and 5.8 yards per rush attempt. Minimal contributions after contact. In the passing game, they're both involved. 4 targets a game for Herbert, 4.5 per game for Rashawn Johnson. A lot of just working with Justin Fields in and around the line of scrimmage or behind it. Little dump out passes, little screens. Both involved, but another one where it's just a little bit hard to pick the volume, a little bit hard to pick where it's going. I think you can throw darts with either one of these guys because they're clearly just going to be in a little bit of like a 60-40 kind of a split. They're both cheap. They project okay. Middle of the board projections. Nothing to go crazy for, but middle of the board projections. Do you want to play them in your stacks with Justin Fields? I mean, as much as I want to play Justin Fields on his own, just a naked Justin Fields stack, which I think is doable in some spots, I think you can go to either one of these running backs and him. You definitely don't want to go to both running backs and him, though, in like a 3-man. This is definitely, I should never say definitely, but odds are you don't want that one. So a little bit murky in the ground game on both sides in this one. In the passing game for Chicago, I like the upside for DJ Moore. 91% of the snaps last week, seeing a 14% target volume, 5 targets a game. 7 targets a game. Darnell Mooney only played the 1. Cole Kmet has played twice, also seeing 7 targets a game as the number 2 option in the offense. And then Chase Claypool drawing 5 targets a game, 15.6% of the volume, playing 79% of the snaps. So you've got some straightforward, these are the guys who are on the field. These are the guys who are going to see most of the action. It's very, very easy to just go to any of these options in stacks with Justin Fields. I think there's plenty of talent in terms of Cole Kmet at the tight end position, 4,300, 5,100. He ranks as tight end 10 on the FanDuel board, 9 on DK. Middle of the board by value. Seeing 85% of the snaps on average. Played 68% of them last week. 7 targets a game and putting up 6.31 yards per target. And in the red zone has seen both of their red zone targets. Obviously a favorite option from the quarterback. 5,700 for DJ Moore's talent, 64 on the FanDuel board. Feels a little bit cheap. Ranks out very well for FanDuel point per dollar at 12th. Obviously the most involved receiver, the clear number 1. An 8.2 yard ADOT. 9.3 air yards per attempt. 14.3 yards per target. That's your prime option, but Mooney and Claypool, not uninteresting receivers. Claypool doesn't really rank out great. 3,400, 5,500. Not giving us primo points or primo value, but seeing 79% of the snaps, 15.6% of the targets, a 6.5 yard ADOT. You have a couple drops? No, he hasn't dropped it yet. No red zone targets. He's a mix-in option. What's the... Bear with me. Let me get back to this game here. Where the hell did it go? Chicago. There was a note that I liked on Claypool that I wanted to cite. But I'm probably not going to be able to find it. Here it is. 41.1 yard air yard share. 41.4%. Pretty significant share of the air yards last week for Claypool. If nothing else, the idea that maybe they'll throw the ball downfield to him a little bit, if they manage to throw the ball downfield. I do think we go to this game on both sides, but as discussed, don't love the value in the Kelsey option. Think there's value in the Fields option. They both rank out as highly, highly playable parts on a slate where they're pretty likely to be involved in a 48.5 point total. You do have the threat of Kansas City getting way out ahead and just grinding the second half into dust, though. It's always something to be concerned with there. That's all I got to say about that one, I think. Let's keep it moving. What's going on in the chat? Beantown, am I crazy to like the Red Rocket this weekend against the Seattle team who has been shredded 2 weeks in a row by pocket passers? Larry C says, no, Thielen or Mingo don't look too bad with him, which is scary to say. Shark and Hurst, he has the weapons. I don't know. I just don't trust it. You know, for all the talk that he was okay last year, wasn't that great. Played a decent chunk of time and didn't really put up that many numbers on probably a better team. I just don't also really like the weapons. Like Thielen a couple years ago, I was much more into. Has kind of disappointed us the last couple of years. Shark is very, very hit and miss. Shark could win you a tournament, right? You could win a tournament with Shark without even Andy Dalton having a day. He just connects with DJ Shark twice on deep balls, and away you go. So I wouldn't take necessarily the receivers out of the game. It's more, do I want to have like two of those guys and Andy Dalton chewing up some lineup shares? And I'm not really sure. Definitely better for skinny stacks in my mind. Dalton +1 would be the way to go. I probably prefer the DJ Shark threat. But yeah, it's not unplayable. Not really a spot that I'm going to go to too much, but not unplayable. What was the... Yeah. Mingo's the wild card there, especially when it comes to the upside. There we go. It's going backward in time. When it comes to the upside of DJ Shark, Mingo clicked on the wrong one. Mingo becomes a little bit of a wild card considering the volume that he's getting in terms of the air yard share, which I don't actually have on the board here. But he's seeing a 14.8 yard ADOT so far. So he's definitely getting some looks down the field. If he chews up those looks instead of DJ, he becomes that guy. But you can see where they project. Not ideal. Kind of just split down the middle for all three of them. But again, capable of big score, capable of a big score. Both downfield guys, obviously capable of catching 2 touchdown passes with Adam Thielen, just the way that he works. And Hayden Hurst could just see, if they get in close, could just see a couple red zone looks and put up a day. So, yeah, there's if you believe, don't let me talk you out of it. Let's put it that way. Dalton and I have never really seen eye to eye. He's never really been my guy. We did Chicago and KC, Dallas and Arizona. Big things in store for Dallas. Let's get there. Hour 19. We're making okay time. Not ideal time, but okay. Dak, monster numbers. Premium opportunity, favored by 13 points. 43 on the board in Vegas. Going up against the 25th ranked by yards per pass attempt. Defense, 6.9 yards so far through the air. 4 yards per rush attempt on the ground, 16th ranked for Arizona. Not really trying to win football games all that hard this year. I think there's major opportunity for Dallas to go out and make a statement here. Defense lost Diggs, but the offense fully healthy, fully engaged. Tony Pollard, a great option at running back. Dak, for his prices, projects great. CD is a weapon in the offense. Brandon Cooks is a weapon for him. Michael Gallup and Jake Ferguson are decent downboard options. Do you end up throwing darts around like the Deuce Vaughn play, something like that? Probably not. I think we probably stick to the focal points here. But it is a spot to probably gain some high-octane offense. On the other side with Dobbs going up against an excellent Dallas defense, even with the downgrade with Diggs unfortunately blowing out his knee, I think Dallas's defense is more than enough to overcome this passing attack, more than enough to overcome James Conner. I don't really want to go to very much Arizona at all. If I'm going to Arizona, gun to my head, or if I needed to play a run back from this game for whatever reason, I probably favor either James Conner or maybe oddly Zach Ertz. Just try and poach the tight end touchdown. But it wouldn't be in stacks. I'm not going to look to Josh Dobbs stacks, I don't think. Very, very limited options on the Arizona side. Dobbs lands as quarterback 16. Does crack to number 10 by points per dollar, but take that for what it's worth. It's just because he's so cheap at 5,100. 6,500 on the FanDuel board. And look, to bring that back real quick to DFS purposes, it's not like that price difference doesn't buy you something. So in football, if he goes out and he has his mediocre day but throws 2 touchdown passes, gains you a handful of points for that cheap a quarterback price, if you get the right correlated receiver, maybe they do make a difference enough where you just absolutely nail the things that you buy with the upgraded amount of salary. Where like a Dak at 66, he ranks second overall by points per dollar, but obviously at a more inflated salary. First overall by points per dollar on the FanDuel board because he costs 76 and has a big projection relative to the Pat Mahomeses of the world. He and Mahomes project out basically the same, and I think Mahomes is like, what, $1,500 more or something? So far this season, Dak's throwing the ball 31 times a game. Put 2 touchdowns up, 199 yards a game on 6.4 yards per pass attempt. 5.9 yards per pass attempt for Josh Dobbs on the other side. He is throwing the ball downfield more. 8.2 intended air yards per attempt, coming up with only 4.1 yards of them completed. 5.3 intended air yards per attempt for Dak. A little bit less of a weaponized downfield attack than it is just a consistent march it down the field and score kind of attack for Dallas. But I really like their weapons. I really like what they do on the field, and they're going to have the opportunity, certainly, to march it up and down the field against this defense. Gaining pressure only 19% of the time, 19% blitz rate, giving up an 8.8 yard defensive ADOT. Plenty of upside for Dak Prescott here. On the ground, if I can get there. Should buy a touchscreen. Not that it would make this easier because I would just constantly forget that I could touch it. But I was just tempted to do you guys can't see that, but I was. James Conner on the Arizona side, probably the focal point of anything Arizona if I'm going to this team. Like I said, it's probably him or maybe I'm just touchdown hunting. And it would probably only be really in a spot where that running back price happened to fit because he projects out semi-okay, or a spot where I was saying, all right, I want to run back play against Dallas, and I just want to try and poach the touchdown. So Conner and Ertz probably my main options there, but I don't really love either one. Conner seeing 78% of the snaps, 72% last week. 4.5 yards per rush attempt, 84 yards a game on 18.5 carries. He's getting the ball. 3.6 yards before contact, but only 0.9 yards after contact per rush attempt. Not great. In terms of the passing game, 3 targets a game, 1 red zone target. It's okay. Tony Pollard's got 3 red zone targets. He's seeing 5.5 targets a game. He's definitely a running back that I want to have involved with my stacks. He's in the running back group, or in the Dallas stack group in my lineup builder column. Definitely a piece of the puzzle in terms of their passing attack. top projected running back on DK, 8th by value. Top projected running back on FanDuel, 11th by value. Really like the spot for this Dallas offense if that wasn't obvious enough. Tony's carrying the ball 19.5 times a game in addition to the looks that he gets in the passing attack. 3.6 yards per rush attempt. 2 touchdowns already through on the ground. Premium option. I mentioned Deuce Vaughn. Projects out okay, only seeing 14% of the snaps. Rico Dowdle seeing 19% on average. Vaughn 2.7 yards per rush attempt, 3.8 yards per rush attempt for Rico Dowdle. In the passing attack, Vaughn's seeing a little bit more, 1.5 targets a game. Probably not really options, even in very large field tournaments. They'd be crazy touchdown dependent, even for these prices. So probably not great, very downboard options. I think we probably cut the running game at Tony Pollard here, and then obviously on the Arizona side with just James Conner. Passing attack wise, starting with the Arizona side where everybody just kind of ranks as meh. Even Zach Ertz, like I said, he'd probably be the guy I would just try and pick off a touchdown with, but 22nd ranked tight end, 23rd by value, 23rd on FanDuel, 21st by value, seeing 72% of the snaps, 9 targets a game. It's a monster target share, 30.5% of the targets. Hasn't put one in the end zone yet. A 7.2 yard ADOT, only 4.28 yards per target. 2 red zone targets. Hasn't converted one yet. 3 red zone targets for Marquise Brown. 1 for Rondale Moore. Kind of a focused passing attack with these 3 options, really. 94% of the snaps last week for Marquise Brown. 89% on average. Seeing 8 targets a game, 25.4%. These 2 guys chewing up most of the volume. Michael Wilson seeing 11.9% of the volume. 4 targets a game. 10.7 yards per target, also on a 15.3 yard ADOT. So seeing a little bit of the downfield action for Michael Wilson rather. That's how enamored with that option I am that I, within 2 seconds, forgot his last name. I guess if you're looking to take shots with a pretty limited quarterback against an excellent defense with his 4th receiving option or 3rd receiving option by volume, knock yourself out. Not a spot for me. On the Dallas side, much more interested here. CD, 7,700, 8,500. 14th ranked DK value, 7th ranked FanDuel value. One of the top projected wide receivers on the board, seeing 75% of the snaps, drawing a 27.4% target share, 9 targets a game. Yet to put the ball in the end zone. Has seen no red zone targets, but obviously the touchdowns are coming. CeeDee Lamb is a premium receiving option. 7.7 yard ADOT, putting up 12.9 yards per target. 7.8 air yards per target. A lot of after the catch work. Brandon Cooks, 1 game played, seen 4 targets. Caught 2 of them. No looks in the red zone there. Red zone targets. Look at the target monster in the red zone. Mr. Ferguson. Come on down. 7 targets so far in the red zone. He's converted 1 of them. 6 targets a game. 17.7% of the volume. One of the more involved tight ends. Outside of your crazy high price Kelsey's. Ferguson's super playable, especially with that touchdown equity. Once they get into the red zone, they are calling his number. So I don't mind that as a play at all. I'm definitely going to have him in stacks. He's going to be a fairly highly prioritized tight end for me. He doesn't project like crazy, but just given the volume, given the number of times that they look, might be a spot that I nudge in groups. Kind of like the idea of giving that a little bit of a bump. Chase the touchdown. Do you like Jake Ferguson better out there, or do you like Michael Gallup better? Gallup played 2 games, 70% of the snaps on average, 72% last week, only seeing 2 targets a game. Not exactly ideal. 6.5% of the volume. No looks in the red zone. 10 yard long. 13.5 yard ADOT. His looks have been a little bit down the field. I kind of prefer the touchdown upside of Jake Ferguson over Michael Gallup. I like CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks better than Ferguson. But this is an offense I'm going to have a lot of different combinations of a lot of. Gallup only 3,700, by the way, obviously is influencing that to a great degree. But he projects out all right on DK. A couple of catches. Let me look his way a couple times. A little bit downfield. Doing all right there. So very limited on the Arizona side in terms of anything, and very enthusiastic about the Dallas side in terms of everything. Another game I think I want to get a little bit invested in both sides of. 48-point total. This might have come down a little bit. Might have closed up a little bit with Jalen Waddle coming out of the game. I did this before Waddle was ruled out, or before I noticed that Waddle was ruled out. It was like 4:30, 6 o'clock, somewhere in there. Larry C says, I almost posted a reply to something said 35 minutes ago. C. Marvin Jones is toast. Yeah, Marvin, not a premium option by any means. Larry says, Larry C asks, theory question. Do you set a max ownership? And if so, do you use max based on history this season? See, like 118% won the million week 1, but 80% won week 2. So an average of like 99%. I assume, Larry, you're talking about like maximum ownership sum. That's not actually something that I do in the lineup construction part of the game. In lineup construction, I do thin slice all the different options, and then I'm just building stacks and groups, so everybody's kind of tied together anyway. So if I say, all right, I only want 8% of any of the quarterbacks across 300 lineups, then it's going to give me combinations of every possible little thing to a great degree. When I build out 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 lineups, you're going to get to little bits of everything just because you're thin slicing things so much. So I shake up my combinations by doing that rather than by doing the total lineup ownership sum. And then when I do sorting, I run sims and then sort. Sometimes I put it into the sort and I take the top of the sort. It basically depends on how much time I have. But that's where it becomes a factor, is whether it's before or after I sim. Once I get to the sorting process, I do make sure that an ownership total is included. Can bounce between ownership product and ownership sum a little bit in football. Ownership sum is totally fine to use. I do not have a number in my head. I would probably lean, especially for a contest like the Millie, more toward being more unowned. That makes sense. But what you want to be careful of in that is that you're not just including guys because they're 0.1% owned. You want to make the thresholds, you want to make the things that the lineup builder uses to create the lineup tied to the points, not the ownership, in my mind. Because otherwise you just get a mix of the optimizer doesn't know any better. It's just focused on, all right, this needs a lower ownership projection, so 0.1% owned. There you go. And that guy's projected for a fantasy point. You get like Eric as Zukanma. I probably should have just said Julian Hill. But you get like one of these guys if you don't tie it to the fantasy points. I like to let the builders run pretty unencumbered in a lot of ways, where I'm just using like thin ownership caps on all of the players to create a lot of shakeup, and then fairly heavy randomization. Although I limit it at times to get more like pure down the line lineups. There's a lot of football's the one where I get the most variant with my lineups, where it's all right, 300 like that, now 300 like this. Sometimes I'll run, give me 100 with Josh Allen at quarterback, give me 100 with Dak Prescott at quarterback, and just drop those in to make sure that I'm absolutely sure that I'm getting those quarterbacks with a good shakeup of their different receivers and of the different combinations that go with them. The last thing you want to do is be working with a pool of the most common constructions of all right, I've got 10 shares of Dak Prescott in 100 lineups, but all 10 of them are Dak, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard stacks. That's a great stack. It's very likely to be a high scoring stack, but it's not the only one that you want in that combination. You want to have that shakeup. So be very conscious of your combinations more than anything else. It's all about combinations. With that in mind, a lot of good combinations to be drawn from this game. I think you could play quarterbacks on either side. Tua and Russ Wilson, both premium talents at quarterback, should be slinging the ball around a little bit. But the Miami defense, 7th ranked so far by yards per pass attempt, only allowing 5.3 yards per pass attempt, giving up a little bit more on the ground. 27th ranked, 4.9 yards per rush attempt, where it's the opposite for Denver, 3.5 yards per rush attempt, stuffing the ball a little bit at the 10th ranked rush attempt rate, but 27th ranked through the air, 7.2 yards per game. Should be an opportunity for Tyreek and Tua, if nothing else, to absolutely feast here. So definitely want to get invested in some Miami stacks. And I think it will have some Russ Wilson. I like Jerry Jeudy as a receiver. I think Cortland Sutton is a capable guy. Marvin Mims obviously has a little bit of upside. They've thrown the ball to Lil Jordan even a few times this season, though that probably diminishes as the season goes on. So a couple options that aren't bad there. The idea that Javonte Williams or Samaje Perine might get a little bit involved on the ground in this one, given what Denver's given up so far, given what Miami's given up so far on the ground. And then on the other side, outside of Tyreek and Tua, you've got Raheem Mostert, who seems like a very capable running back. You've got Tyler Kroft to work with at the tight end spot. Where's isn't Durham Smythe supposed to be here? Where the hell did he go? Hang on. Sorted him out by accident, I think. There he is. That's why I was like, wait, Tyler Kroft. Durham Smythe. That's the tight end I like. Cheap, $29.48. I think that's going to be a capable spot. Just given the idea that Jalen Waddle's not going to be out there. And then you get like River Carcraft, Braxton Berrios. A little bit of uptake. Oh, that's right. I had to edit their projections. I did it. The projections are in a different file, so I moved them over just before the show started so that I could talk about them. So when we jump to that board, they're not going to be ranked correctly, given that they got a major uptick, these three guys, in the passing attack. A little bit of an uptick for Tyreek when we took Jalen out. A little bit of a bump, I think, for Raheem Mostert, too, if I remember. But options galore in this one. Both quarterbacks project out fairly well, 11th and 12th on both sites. Okay for value. 33 attempts a game for Russ Wilson, 37.5 for Tua. Obviously, Miami's just been slinging the ball around like crazy. 357.5 yards per game, 4 touchdowns already, 9.5 yards per pass attempt. Dynamic passing game on the Miami side. 7.3 yards per pass attempt so far for Russ Wilson. Only 4.9 air yards per attempt and 6.6 intended air yards versus the downfield action with Tua, 10.3 intended air yards per attempt, completing 6 air yards per attempt. He's had 5 drops against already, too. To have the numbers already with 5 drops on the board in 2 games, pretty damn good. Russ, not exactly the rusher that he once was. I'm not really worried about it. Taking off 3.5 times a game, does have 57 yards. 8.1 yards per rush attempt, but it's not going to be a focus, I don't think, for Russ Wilson at this point. And Tua, they're not going to let him run at all. Either way, at quarterback, I think you're doing all right here. Russ, fairly cheap, very cheap on DK at $5,900. Projects out as the number 5 by value over there. $7,400 on FanDuel, 10th by value. Tua, a little bit more expensive, but the more productive of the two, and just a hyper-focused offense in that passing attack. Greg Biancone asks, no shadow for Tyreek in this matchup. Probably. Don't know. Not something I really focus on that much. Defensive scheming. Like, these guys face those schemes most of the time. So I don't get too deep into individual this receivers facing that corner type matchups. But if you've got thoughts on it, Larry C responds there. I think Surtain will follow him some, but not all the time. I don't think he plays much in the slot. Kevin O says Wilson needs to motor more. Okay. Interesting. I'm not sure. Can't imagine they're scheming much for a mobile quarterback there. He's had that talent throughout his career. How old is Russ now? 32, 33, something like that. 34. That went fast. I think we're going to either quarterback. But to go back to that question, it's just not something I sweat all that much. And a guy as hyper talented as Tyreek, with the ability and the connection that he and Tua have to find one another and everything they do on the field. Jake Swells answers, Tyreek will eat Surtain alive. So, yeah, it's just honestly not something I get too deep into. I let Vegas take care of a lot of stuff like that. We talked about the weather in week 1, and obviously there's weather around the league with the impending tropical storm all up and down the East Coast, by the way. But I let Vegas take care of shit like that. If it was going to make a dramatic impact on the output, it's seen through that Vegas point total. It's kind of how I handle those things. Good luck with that assignment if that's what your coach wants from you. Yeah. Let's go out there and cover Tyreek Hill. No, thank you. Although I think it would be funny if you had a video of me trying to do it, which would become a video of me running 5 yards and then just stopping and watching Tyreek Hill catch an 80-yard touchdown pass. Yeah, no Waddle. They obviously will be able to key on Tyreek a little bit more. But I think, again, just the talent, I think, overcomes. In the rushing game, yep. Starting with Mostert, projects out very, very well here. 73% of the snaps, 14 rushing attempts per game, putting up 79 yards a game, 5.6 yards per rush attempt, and 3 rushing touchdowns already. Only 0.5 yards after contact, but 5.1 yards per before contact per attempt. An elusive, fast, hits the holes really, really well running back. Looks really good right now. I was just like on the eyeball test. Not that I like to go to the eyeball test for any of this. It's not at all predictive of anything. But just when you talk about guys that look good out there, Mostert's on that list right now. Only 1.5 targets a game, putting up 6.3 yards per catch. Seen 1 target in the red zone though. They're willing to look to him in the passing game around in the red zone too. That's just additional upside for him. Only 10% of the snaps so far for Devon Kane in the 1 game that he's played. There's no Salvin Ahmed, so he should see a little bit of an uptick here. Ahmed was involved in the passing game, so you could see a little bit of that here from McCain. Saw a target last week in limited action. On this side, a little bit more of a split between Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine, kind of easing Javonte back in still. Seeing 45% of the snaps on average, 45% last week, 48% going Samaje's way. 5 yards per rushing attempt for Samaje. No touchdowns on the ground for either one of them. Neither one of them doing much before any contact. Both of them putting up decent after contact numbers so far. But overall, 3.8 yards per rush attempt for Javonte on 12.5 carries, 4.5 carries a game for Samaje. A little bit more involved in terms of targets, 4 targets a game, catching 3.5 of them, 4.5 targets a game for Javonte. So both running backs do get involved in the passing attack. I think you can leave them in, but it's a split. I don't really love the split between these two. And the question mark still on, how much do they, if Javonte's having a good game, how much do they lean into him and give him a little bit more and let him really crack that ceiling game? He doesn't need a crazy ceiling, but he's not at great value prices either. This is an okay projection. The prices aren't terrible, but they're not in the teens in terms of our value ratings. Playable parts, but not priorities. Let's put it that way. Priorities up and down in the passing game, though. Starting with the big man, obviously projects out very well. Certainly some concerns about the idea that he's going to be the focus in the passing attack. Waddle obviously not in. He's got a 0 projection, but I didn't get a chance to take him out. We can do that right there. So Barrios gets a little bit of an uptick. Durham Smythe gets a little bit of an uptick. River Craycraft gets a little bit of an uptick. Keep in mind these rankings right here and the FanDuel ones not updated. They'll climb a little bit, but none of them are going to go bananas. It's not like they're projected into the double digits or anything. Limited options. Braxton Berrios seeing 4 targets a game, 11% of the volume. Durham Smythe seeing 13.7%. River Craycraft 9.6% so far. Handful of targets apiece. Craycraft does have a receiving touchdown. He's got 2 looks in the red zone. Durham Smythe got a red zone look. But Tyreek Hill, 5 looks in the red zone. obviously the primary focus in this passing attack. Even when Jalen Waddle's out there, Tyreek Hill's the primary focus, but especially now, 32.9% of the volume, seeing 12 targets a game, a 14.8 yard ADOT, 10.6 yards per target, 15.3 yard ADOT for Berrios. Not bad. 9.3 for Craycraft. It's an offense that likes to throw the ball downfield. That's something I want to get invested in for DFS purposes. Greg says, I'm playing Tyreek over Jefferson in any case. Look, I think both of them are crazy playable. Jefferson, I expect to be, even at price, one of the highest owned players of the week. It's that Minnesota Chargers game, not exactly sneaky, but a killer spot. Jake Swale says, Craycraft sneaky for the touchdown. Yeah, look, I think these guys are definitely going to be in play. All three of these guys. If you consider the idea that they're just going to take Waddle's targets, give like 2 of them to Hill, and then spread the other ones around to these guys, I think there's potential there. They could just directly spread those targets around between these guys. None of these guys fills Jalen Waddle's shoes, but none of these guys are priced like him either. But Hill's obviously the primetime option here. Second by projection on both sites. 24th by value. 8th by value on FanDuel. Monster option. Jerry Jeudy, though, on the Denver side of things, 6,500, 6,100. Pretty cheap. Doesn't rank out great. Not on the DK board, anyway. 65, I guess, on some relative DK pricing there. Not great for the money. But the FanDuel board likes him. 15th by value on FanDuel. 68% of the snaps in his lone game last week, saw only 8.5% of the targets, but that amount that's of the total targets on the season. 5 targets in his one game. 6 targets a game for Cortland Sutton so far, but one of those was played without Jerry Jeudy. Some involvement for Mims and Brandon Johnson and little Jordan Humphrey, but very minimal. Your focuses are really Jeudy, Sutton, and Mims here. Mims only 2 targets a game, but monster performance. 61 yards per game so far. 30.5 yards per target. He broke a 60-yarder. He's done a lot with minimal targets. So really, the volume's going to be primarily right here. I think Troutman is an option at the tight end spot. 3,000. Doesn't project out great. But seeing 77% of the snaps, 82% last week. 3 targets a game, 10.2% of the volume, and has seen 3 red zone targets. So just kind of a forgotten man in that offense for cheap. Not bad. I might give him a little bit of a nudge. Doesn't look like he's projecting quite high enough. So definitely, 1, 2, so high-end options on either side, and then at least playable parts down the board on both sides. Goddamn mouse. I don't think Braxton Berrios is completely untalented. Interesting tight end options on both sides. So some very playable parts, a very tall peak, and kind of a broad middle in this one. What did I do? Okay. Fix this. Take the zeros out. All right, we're back. That was Denver, Miami, Houston, Jacksonville. Like I said at the top, game I think is going to be kind of interesting here. 44.5 point total. Both teams playing with pace. Jacksonville favored by 8. Could definitely put it away early, grind it down in the second half. I think that would favor, though, a little bit of Travis Etienne. Definitely some upside for him. I like the passing attack. Trevor Lawrence, not all that expensive, projects out fairly well. A lot of weapons to work with. Wrote about Christian Kirk last week, and he delivered. Projects out well again this week. Not crazy high priced. Calvin Ridley is obviously a star caliber wide receiver. Has been. Evan Engram, high-end tight end who projects pretty well. Even like a Jamal Agnew down there, drawing an okay projection for the money. And then on the other side, C.J. Stroud has been interesting so far. They're throwing the ball a little bit. He and Nico have developed a connection. Tank Dell projects out all right. Robert Woods projects out all right. Dalton Schultz projects out all right. If Houston stays in this game early, this could turn into an interesting, cheap shootout. They obviously got to hang. Going up against the 8th ranked 3.5 yards per rush attempt defense, but a 19th ranked 6.4 yards per pass attempt defense. They'll do their part with a lack of defense for Jacksonville. 19th ranked against the run, 26th ranked against the pass, 4.3 yards on the ground, 6.9 yards per attempt through the air. Bodes well for Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk. A lot of weapons here. Yeah, Jake says nails it. Ridley, dynamic player. Definitely. Kevin O says Tyreek is small, gets lost in coverage. Did you see the video of Tyreek and the little kids? There was he visited some youth organization, youth center, school. I'm not sure what it was. But apparently the kids had gone viral because a kid was making like sick plays in a backyard football game while wearing a Tyreek Hill jersey. So Hill saw it at some point and went and paid the kids a visit. They went bananas, obviously. He gave them a little jersey. It's a cool little moment. I like seeing stuff like that. A lot nicer seeing those things going around than turning on the news and seeing somebody, so-and-so player beat up so-and-so girlfriend, driving drunk, whatever. Now I just sound like an old man. But what I'm saying is I like seeing these guys that are good guys doing good things rather than the ugly side of the league. DK Metcalf will play. Confirmed. This is good. I was just in an apartment complex, so that wasn't even an organized thing. It's even cooler. I assumed it was like a boys and girls club or something like that. Even cooler. Kevin O wants a shootout in this one. I agree. I would like to have a shootout in this one. I'm going to have parts of this game. Stroud throwing the ball 45.5 times a game, completing 64% of his passes, 313 yards so far, playing with a hurt shoulder too. Pretty good. 6.9 yards per pass attempt, 7.7 intended air yards per attempt. So he's throwing the ball downfield a little bit more than Trevor Lawrence so far. 6.9 intended air yards per attempt for Lawrence, 6.3 yards per pass attempt. 2 TDs, throwing it 36.5 times per game. A little bit more to work with on Lawrence's side, where Stroud just kind of has to throw the ball. They're going to be playing from behind all year. He doesn't have a ton to work with on the ground, where Lawrence has weapons all over the field, and they're going to be involved / leading all season. So it makes sense that he's throwing the ball a little bit less, but a very effective kid and has had some big games, last year. So I like the opportunity there. Getting into the rushing game, Etienne, 72% of the snaps last week, 76% on average. The clear number one back in that backfield, projects out very well. 5th overall by points and value on DK. 5th and 8th on the FanDuel slate. Carrying the ball 15 times a game, 58.5 yards per game, 3.9 yards per rush attempt. Got one in on the ground already. Tank got one in on the ground already too. But he's only carrying the ball 7 times a game, seeing 21% of the snaps. Didn't play last week, it looks like. D'Ernest Johnson, 9% of the snaps last week, 5% overall, a non-factor there. So really, it's the ATN show on the ground here for Jacksonville. For the money, one of the better options at running back this week. On the ground for Houston, Dameon Pierce. Moderate projection for a guy seeing 46% of the snaps. Singletary, a low projection for a guy seeing 29% of the snaps. Last week, that was 45 and 36. 13 carries, 5.5 carries a game. Not giving us anything in terms of 2.7 yards per rush attempt, 2.6 yards per rush attempt, no touchdowns, 1.3 yards after contact, 0.8 yards after contact. There's not much here. Targets, Pierce involved a little bit in the passing game, 3 targets a game, 1 red zone target. Pretty low end. If I want to go to the Houston offense, I just want the quarterback and give me a couple of these receivers. Nico, the premium option, 66% of the snaps on average, 62% last week, 79% last week for Tank Dell, and 86% for Robert Woods. Woods chewing up 35.2% of the volume, 10 targets a game. Nico seeing also 10 targets, 23.3% of the volume. That's a weird statistical anomaly. So they're coming from the same source, right? I believe those are coming from the same statistical source. That's a weird wrinkle. Maybe it's doing it on... It's team target share, though. He's seen more snaps. I don't know why that would equate to the same number of targets per game in the same number of games being a different percentage. Well, we're not going to worry about it. Either way, they're both seeing a lot of targets. 11.3 yards per target produced by Nico on a 13.5 yard ADOT. He's clearly the better of the two options between those two guys. He's got a touchdown. Tank Dell also has a touchdown. 9.2 yard ADOT for Tank. 9.1 yard ADOT for Robert Woods. Throwing the ball downfield a decent amount. Woods does have three targets in the red zone. Dalton Schultz, the tight end, has 2. Schultz giving us excuse me. Schultz giving us 3 catches a game on 6 targets a game. 12.8% of the volume. Working mostly around the line of scrimmage, mostly as a safety valve type tight end. Only 3.45 yards per target. Hasn't gotten in the end zone yet. But a capable tight end who will get looks in the red zone from this team. Not uninteresting. Projects out 8th on DK. 9th on FanDuel. 7th by value. Mix and match parts the rest of the way there. And then Ridley, 7th overall DK projection, 8th FanDuel projection. Doing a little bit better on FanDuel by points per dollar than on DK, but a highly, highly playable part on both sites. 80% of the snaps on average, 10 targets a game, 26% of the volume, 23.3% of the volume for Christian Kirk. 9 targets a game, saw 11 last week. Saw a nice uptick last week, had a very productive day. Red zone targets, Calvin Ridley all day. 5 targets in the red zone. Nobody else has one in the group of active receivers. I imagine Zay Jones has a couple. Evan Engram at the tight end position, 4,800, projects very well. 4th overall tight end. 5th by value on FanDuel, 12th by value on DK. Solid projections either way. 75% of the snaps, seeing 7 targets a game, 17.8% of the volume. 4.2 yard ADOT, but giving us 8.15 yards per target, so doing a little bit with the ball in his hands. Hasn't gotten in the end zone yet, but that'll come. Calvin, top of the board. I talked about Calvin, right? 10 targets, 9.1 yard ADOT. What's not to like about Calvin Ridley? All the looks in the red zone. Agnew, if you want to go downboard, he projects okay. 3,000 on DK, 4,800 on FanDuel. Just kind of a low-end mixer, but for very cheap. 37% of the snaps last week, 20% of the snaps on average. Should be the third man, given the absence of Zay. Only 1 target, 1.4% of the target share, 5 yard ADOT. No guarantees. No guarantees he even sees a look, but it seems like he's going to be the guy to slide into that role. Any dissenting opinions on that? Oh, Larry, no problem. Larry says, thanks for the theory question. Just got up to it. Larry's still a little bit behind. Even at 1.5 times speed, he can't catch up with all this meandering through this late. So options galore, both sides of this one. I think it's a good spot to have some run back plays for sure with like Nico, maybe some Robert Woods coming back the other way. You could even take the cheap tight end as a run back play. I don't mind that at all. And it works both ways. Ridley, Kirk, Engram, all capable run back plays against a Houston stack. Definitely a spot where I'm going to make a little bit of an investment in this 45 point total or 44.5 point total. $44 points on the board in Baltimore. I feel like it's a spot where people in the Baltimore offense, people just like to go to Lamar Jackson, star caliber upside, a guy who can win a slate, not entirely on his own, but can go a long way toward winning a slate with Lamar Jackson at quarterback on the right day. Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, two very capable options to work with in the offense. Not a lot that I love beyond that. I do think Rashad Bateman will be much more involved this week, and he's pretty cheap. So he projects out okay. I don't love the Gus Edwards play. He projects out all right. Lamar, again, he and Mark Andrews or he and Zay Flowers could go out there and just break the slate in half. Absolutely. Going up against the 28th ranked passing defense, 7.3 yards per pass attempt allowed so far. They've been first against the run with 2.6 yards per rush attempt. So it's probably not the day to look to the Gus Edwards side. Does that limit Lamar on design runs? Potentially. But there's obviously upside there. I just think that people go to this one maybe a little bit more than they go to that Jacksonville-Houston game, at least on the Baltimore side. So I'd just probably rather be away from the crowd. If that's not the case, then maybe I get a little bit more invested in Lamar Jackson stacks. He obviously projects very well, one of the premium options on the slate, and I like his top two options, if nothing else. Minshew, I know people fall in love with the option when he plays. Projects out a little bit better than Andy Dalton. I'll give him that much. Premium receiver in Michael Pittman. An okay running back in Moss. And then we start to trickle down. Kylan Granson, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. There's not a ton to work with. Don't love the Gardner Minshew option. For his purposes, Lamar, 5th ranked on both sites by projections, 3rd by FanDuel value is also interesting. That probably also renders him pretty popular over there, assuming that he's similarly ranked for value around the industry. So far, 203 yards a game, throwing the ball just 27.5 times a game. Minshew's only played one game. Let's just change this to... He got in the first game and threw like 2 passes, but for all intents and purposes, this was the game that he put up last week when he came in after Richardson went out. 171 yards, a touchdown. 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Threw the ball. Probably call it like 23 times or 22 times. Oh, I didn't want to type 2 there. I want to have the formula. Yeah, okay. So Lamar obviously is the star between these two. 7.4 yards, 4 yards per pass attempt. 7.3 intended air yards per pass attempt, completing 5.2 air yards per attempt. He's got a 50-yard look already. 3 drops, thrown the ball 9 times in the end zone, only resulted in 2 touchdowns. Not ideal conversion rate. Obviously a primo rusher, 5.1 yards per rush attempt, 9 rushes a game. Hasn't run one in yet, but I think we know that's coming. On the ground, Moss projects out okay. 11th by value on DK, 10th by value on FanDuel, mid-teens ranked by projections. Seeing 98% of the snaps, or saw 98% of the snaps in his one start, carried the ball 18 times, 4.9 yards per rush attempt, scored a touchdown on the ground. Going up against Baltimore and a defense that ranks 12th against the run, though. 3.6 yards per rush attempt. Not an ideal situation for a guy that's a medium talent at running back. 1.9 yards after contact, 3 yards before contact so far. Pair of broken tackles in his one game. Did see 1 look in the red zone and 4 targets. So that's not uninteresting if you're going to stacks of the Colts offense. I just don't think it's a very good stack to go to today. Maybe a couple one-offs of Zach Moss just as a mixer at running back for 55, 64. It's not like he doesn't project well for value. So I do think maybe that's the way you go, is just roster Moss as a mixer for value, roster Pittman as a mixer at the receiver position, and you don't really build stacks with Indy. And then Edwards just going up against a stout rush defense, doesn't project out very well. 34% of the snaps on average, 43% last week. Carried the ball 9 times for 47 yards. 5.2 yards per rush attempt and a touchdown. Isn't bad. 4.1 yards before contact, only 1.1 yards after contact. Not involved at all in the passing game. Melvin Gordon's also here to chew up some looks, probably. And who did I say up top was also in this offense now? Somebody got promoted from the practice team. Kenyon Drake? I think so. I feel like that was the note I saw earlier. News. Where's the news? Total waste of time. Not a guy who's going to hit the field at all. Oh, DeAndre Hopkins expected to play. That's a plus. Pacheco game time decision. Kenyon Drake. It was Kenyon Drake. So he'll probably put on pads for this game. I don't know if he'll be on the field. Don't know how much more he might be on the field than Melvin Gordon. I expect Gus Edwards to lead the rushing attack. I just think it's a limited opportunity in terms of the rushing. If you're going to Baltimore, I think we look to the passing game. You can run Lamar Jackson on his own, but you probably want him involved with some of these pass catchers. No Odell this week. I think that's just, whoops, wrong game. I think that just plays into Zay Flowers' hands. Projects out fairly well, mid-teens. Lands up at 9th on the FanDuel board by value. Playing 81% of the snaps on average, 27.8% of the target share. Pretty monster target share. 14.8% of the target share going Mark Andrews' way. That's also 8 targets a game. He's only played once. He only played one game. That's right. 8 targets in his one game for Mark Andrews. Obviously a premium talent at tight end, one of the top overall tight ends in all of football. Came damn near saying almost all of baseball there. 1 receiving touchdown in his one performance. So 1 red zone target. Zay Flowers has seen 5 targets in the red zone already. Hasn't turned it into a touchdown yet, but got to feel like they're coming. 6.2 yard ADOT, giving us 9.3 yards per target. High-end option. Rashad Bateman, as I said at the beginning of the show, was getting a little bit of coach speak today saying, yeah, of course he's going to be involved. Like, we like him. We got to go to him. He's going to be out there. Is that a decoy? Who knows? 50% of the snaps on average, 59% last week. 3 targets a game, 11.1% of the volume, a 7-yard ADOT. Hasn't been super involved, hasn't been super productive. 3 catches a game with 8.8 yards per target. Not ideal, but probably going to be the 3rd option in that passing offense. Nelson Aguilar, I have a tough time buying that he's going to be at all relevant. He did get in the end zone. 6 targets a game in his 6 targets in his one game. 11.1% of the volume. A 17-yard ADOT. 1 red zone target. Maybe he gets more involved. Maybe he gets more involved than Bateman. Maybe it was the decoy. If the Bateman coach speak was a decoy, that means it's Nelson. Not a guy. It's a guy that I will include in the pool. I will include in groups. I will make sure that I get to a little bit. If I go to this offense 20 times for Lamar stacks, I would have a couple of Aguilar shares in there. Just don't trust him at all. It's really the Pittman show on the other side. It's the only guy that really projects interestingly. 17th, 19th across sites by projection, but only 39th and 18th by value. 98% of the snaps, 32.9% of the targets. A monster in terms of targets. Kylan Granson seeing a 14.3% target share, and then Josh Downs seeing 17.1%. Downs turning it into 5.58 yards per target, 5.5 yards for the tight end, 6.65 yards per target for Pittman. Pittman's gotten the end zone once. Granson's gotten the end zone once. Pittman's seen 2 red zone targets. Josh Downs has oddly seen 3 red zone targets. Maybe Downs is a little bit sneaky if you're going to that Indy offense. I just don't love the opportunity for Indy here. Doesn't project out great, but should be out there for some snaps and obviously getting some looks while he's out there running routes. So, playable. Alec Pierce drawing a little bit of a projection. Nothing great. 100% of the snaps last week, 95% on average, drawing 3 targets a game, 7.1% of the volume, 9-yard ADOT. Another guy that's, I don't want to go out of my way for Alec Pierce shares. If I built out a bunch of stacks of this team, of Gardner Minshew, would I have some Alec Pierce in there? Yeah. Am I planning on building out a bunch of Gardner Minshew stacks? No. Would I take Alec Pierce as a very cheap one-off across a different lineup? Maybe, but I mean, I'd probably rather have Josh Downs, given more looks for 200 less on FanDuel, 100 more on DK. They project out basically the same. I just really don't like the Indy side of this one. Baltimore all day, but not so much Indy. And the big one. It's all downhill after this game. I feel like I should almost keep this game for the end of the show. Otherwise, everybody's just going to bail. This is your spicy meatball of the week. 54.5 point total. Monster. Minnesota only favored by 1 as of the last update I ran here. Kevin O says Zay all the way on FanDuel. I like the Zay spot. I do. Talented guy. Richardson would smash in that spot if available, says Jake. Yeah, it could be. It would be definitely a more interesting game, a more interesting spot. Let's put it that way. He's shown a little bit of talent. The rookie quarterback class hasn't been bad. Beantown, every time that Aguilar does anything, I think it's a fluke. Just not a receiver I like at all. Aguilar. What do we have recent? Two touchdowns on 53 targets last year, 3 on 64 targets the year before. Always puts up a decent yards per reception. Gives you some yardage if he happens to catch the ball. Caught 37 of 64 last year, 31 of 53 last year, 37 of 64 the year before, 48 of 82 the year before that for 896 yards and 8 touchdowns in his big season. That was with Las Vegas. Over the course of his career, what are we at here? 45 divided by 579. A 59.5% catch rate over the course of his career. Just not somebody I really trust. I think the outlier was that he caught 5 of 6 balls. I think that's really, what made that kind of a weird game. A fluke, if you will. Jake Swales Cousins with Hawk and Addison. Love it. Love it. Anything Kirk Cousins this week? Love it. Absolutely. I've been on the Kirk Cousins play each of the first 2 weeks, and I'm going right back to the well here. Like I said, he's leading the league in passing despite the fact that they've had a few key turnovers. There's just options up and down this game. Justin Herbert, premium projection, including the bonus on the DK slate. The only guy I think getting the bonus in the projections. Monster projection on FanDuel. Keenan Allen, his number 1 option. Mike Williams, his 1A. Just as talented. Either way, you stack up both of those guys pretty enthusiastically. I think you can play both of those guys together. I kind of like spreading it out. Get a Keenan and Quentin. Get some Keenan and maybe some Gerald Everett. Maybe it's just Keenan skinny stacks. Mike Williams skinny stacks. But I think you can play these guys together. I think there's enough volume in the passing game to support it. And there's certainly enough upside in this game in particular to support it. On the Cousins side, he's obviously got the monster weapon in just completely unstoppable Justin Jefferson, leading the world in wide receiver projections. Just an absolute beast. But I think Hawkinson is an excellent option at tight end. I think KJ and Jordan Addison are very, very playable second and third. Jordan Addison and KJ, I should say, in that order. Second and third options in the passing attack in terms of wide receivers. Not as much involvement on the ground in this one, I don't think. Josh Kelly should see the lion's share of carries again with Eckler out. 5,400, 6,100. It's the right price. I think he's definitely playable, but I just don't want to take that much away from the passing game, really. If I'm going to this game, I want the passing attacks. Same story with Madison on the other side. Even without Akers cutting into, or unlikely to cut into his share, I just don't love it. I want to get to the pass catchers. I really want to get very invested in this game, even with popularity. I just don't care. There's upside, and you just get differentiated in other spots around the board. You book some of the, not lock upside, but you book some of the high ceiling here, and you find your differentiated plays elsewhere. Quarterback number 6 on DK for Kirk Cousins. Quarterback number 1 on both sites for Justin Herbert. First on DK value, 6th on DK value for Cousins. 2nd and 4th by FanDuel points per dollar. Cousins throwing the ball an outrageous amount of the time, 44 attempts per game. Herbert right there at 37 attempts per game. Cousins putting up 354 yards a game. He's got 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, multiple fumbles. Like I said, He's got these 6 touchdowns and 354 yards a game, despite a couple key turnovers that cost them opportunities to score additional touchdowns. 8 yards per pass attempt, 5.1 yards through the air, 8.8 yards intended air yards per attempt, 9.1 intended air yards per attempt for Justin Herbert. Both teams going to throw the ball downfield to their premium star receivers. 2 looks over 40 yards for Kirk Cousins. One of them went over 50. 40 yards. A lot of 30-yard passes for these offenses. 15 attempts in the red zone for Herbert with 3 touchdowns. 10 attempts in the red zone with 6 touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. And just premium options to work with. Pressure rates, 18% for Minnesota going against Herbert. Only 13.5% for the Chargers against Kirk Cousins. These guys are going to have time to throw. They've got awesome options to throw to. They're going up against, respectively, the 12th and 11th ranked pass defenses when it comes to pass yards. Not soft targets, but not the league leaders by any means. These are just average-ish numbers. These are the ones that fall into, all right, so they're separated by 0.2 from like the bottom of the board. King of Smack says Trevor Lawrence bounce back spot, guys. Better get on that train. Lawrence, Ridley, Kirk going to be very low owned, and if they go off, which I anticipate, woo! I like that spot, King of Smack. I do. I like the Christian Kirk play last week. I like it again this week. I love Ridley basically any given week. Like Trevor Lawrence. I also like the other weapons in that offense with ATN and with Evan Ingram. Yeah, a lot of opportunity there. I like that game on both sides. I just think that's going to be one of the games, and hopefully, if it, like you say, if it goes low owned, that becomes a very interesting spot. Looking into the running backs in this one kind of quickly. Again, not overly enamored with the running game in this one. Madison drawing the best projection on the ground. He does rank 8th and 3rd by value, so I guess I should be a little bit more into him than I was saying. Just by virtue of how he projects and how he's priced, he's probably going to be fairly popular. Probably going to come up a decent amount in lineups. He's seeing 5 targets a game, so he's involved enough in the passing attack that I do think there's probably reason to believe that he should be involved in groups, that he should be a part of what you allow in your Kirk Cousins stacks. But that said, I don't want to wrangle it down to give me 2 players with Kirk Cousins and then have so many shares go to Alexander Madison just because of how he's relatively projected and priced compared to the KJ Osbornes and Addisons of the world. I would still rather have more of those guys. So if you do add them to your stacks, to your groups, I would be cautious about maybe capping the degree to which you get Alexander Madison in your Kirk Cousins and 1 receiver stacks. And then maybe you rotate him out to individual plays on his own. Giving us 3.3 yards per rushing attempt on 9.5 carries a game. Hasn't gotten in the end zone yet. Only 1.1 yards after contact, 2.2 yards before contact. I actually just prefer what he would do in the passing game. So there is that. Also does limit my expectation for him in that individual play, but obviously projects well enough here that there's some upside. Josh Kelly doesn't project great. 79% of the snaps last week as the focus back. Did carry the ball 14.5 times. Carrying the ball 14.5 times a game, 65 yards on the ground per game, 4.5 yards per rush attempt. Got the ball in the end zone once, broke a 15-yard long. Not at all involved in the passing game. Kelly's playable. I mean, it's not like he projects completely badly. Medium projection, medium value ranking, medium points ranking. I just want to get to much more of the passing game. But could they throw the ball downfield for 80 yards and then run it in? Absolutely. Both these teams could do that. That said, this is where the action is. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, 1-1A. Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9 by value, 5 by value, 3 and 6, 5 and 6 across sites. Pretty tremendous for have those 2 options on the same team. 90+% of the snaps, 27.1% target share for Keenan, 25.7% for Mike Williams. They hog up most of the targets in this offense. Quentin Johnson drawing just 7.1%, 3 targets a game. 11-yard A-dot. All 3 of these guys have basically an 11-yard A-dot. They just fire downfield to whoever gets open. But obviously the kid is not the target right now that the other two are. He does have talent. He's seen one look in the red zone. Seen one look for Gerald Everett in the red zone. Josh Palmer, oddly, still kind of involved. 50% of the snaps, 8.6% target share, seeing 3 targets a game, and he's seen 3 looks in the red zone already. So you probably don't want to completely discount Josh Palmer even in this offense. Doesn't project great, lowest projected of their wide receivers, but he's also very low cost, 3,300, 4,900. The idea that maybe they call his number in the red zone, there is that opportunity for him to snag the touchdown, take it away from Mike Williams, take it away from Quentin Johnson. Justin Jefferson, a lot less competition than on this side. Like Keenan Allen, Mike Williams is a legit 1A competition for, you couldn't argue with throwing the ball to Mike Williams more than Keenan Allen in any given game. If they came out of here throwing the ball significantly more to Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, or even TJ Hawkinson, I think people would have a lot to say about it. Justin Jefferson drawing 13 targets a game, 28.7% of the volume, 30.9 yards per game on 10 catches, giving us 12.36 yards per target, 10-yard ADOT, 15.5 yard ADOT for Jordan Addison, giving us 12.09 yards per target. He's gotten the ball in the end zone twice. Hawkinson's gotten the ball in the end zone twice. Jefferson yet to score through the air, but I think we know it's coming. KJ's gotten in the end zone. 13.8% of the targets for KJ, 12% for Addison, 19.5% for Hawkinson. Hawkinson is the second option in this passing offense. It's number 1, number 2, quite clearly. And then these guys are kind of battling for the third spot right now. I prefer Addison, but it's fairly close. They project out all right. They're seeing similar volume. 93% of the snaps on average for Osborne. Osborne's out there more often. But when Addison goes out there and runs a route, he's seeing targets. You do have three red zone targets for KJ Osborne so far to Addison's 1. Justin Jefferson only 1 look in the red zone so far. And like I said, hasn't converted, but obviously putting up monster games even without. Premium option. 9,300 still projects out 4th by value on DK. 1st overall on FanDuel for 9,700 on both points and value. Pretty killer. Hawkinson, the 2nd ranked tight end on DK, 6th by value, 2nd on both categories on FanDuel. Gonna go to this game a lot in the air. I think this is one where you kind of want to lock in the run back play. If this game goes off, this game's going off. So I think you do want to say, hey, give me a lot of stacks of Cousins +1, Cousins +2, and have a run back from the other side. Cousins +1 plus Mike Williams, Cousins +2 plus Keenan Allen. Let those combinations flow through your lineups this week. You can run off some shares where there's no run back for sure. You can run off some shares of 2-man stacks, some shares of 1-man stacks. I would want it all in the pool, though. I want a lot of combinations. But if there's any game on deck, this is the one that I absolutely want to have some run back plays from. This is the game that could go nuclear, which means it's probably the game that's going to disappoint. They'll score 30 combined points. It'll be a 16-14 game decided by a safety. Kevin O's been talking up Hawkinson Hunter. King of Smack says a lot of people don't talk about them plays like that and then be the ones that break the slate. It just helps you get Jefferson. Kind of Minshew, Granson with Gus Edwards. Going to be the bell cow because Hill is out. Don't love that Gus Edwards spot, I got to say. King of Smack says I wouldn't go with ATN. It's lower owned guys at running back you can plug in and get there with. Not a bad strategy for sure. I always like to take some lower owned running backs. That's the thing. I'll go with some chalky wideouts. Look for the big days, and then I think you can. I agree with what King of Smack is saying there. I do think you could pick off those big days from running backs. I just disagree a little bit with the Gus Edwards one. But anything that helps you pay for pieces from this game, worth getting to. You can stack this one. You can absolutely draw one-offs from this game. I think that's obviously kind of obvious. Obviously obvious. Let's keep it moving. Only a couple games to go. 3 left. 2:24 into the show. Appreciate everybody hanging out, everybody who's stuck with us, everybody who's catching up from behind, everybody who's going to be checking it out overnight, tomorrow morning as they're building lineups, etc., etc. You guys are awesome for supporting this, for sitting here listening to me talk about football for what'll end up being close to 3 hours. One of these days, I swear, we're going to get into the weekly, day by day. Like Tuesday, we'll break down stacks and quarterbacks. Wednesday, I say this every week. We will get there. That is my goal. It'll be easier once baseball's over after next week. I don't really like this game at all. I said that at the top. I kind of stick with it. 36-point total. Jets only 2.5-point dogs. What does that say about the Patriots? That the Jets with Zach Wilson are only 2.5-point dogs here. Not a great spot. An okay projection for Ramondre. Kind of mediocre for Mac Jones. Nobody really projecting well in the passing game for New England. Garrett Wilson projects well because he's just kind of unstoppable. Can't make him not project at least okay, even with Zach Wilson throwing to him. Had a long touchdown, supported his upside, and got there. I felt like last week he was under-projected around the industry. I had him a little bit ahead. He was featured in the above-below column, and he got there, but I feel like that was a skin of our teeth kind of a got there. Breece Hall could see a decent amount of volume going up against a defense, giving up the 18th ranked 6.3 yards per rush attempt. The Wilsons will be going up against the 20th ranked 4.4 yards per rush attempt defense. So there's that. It's just one of those Wilsons is Zach Wilson. It's unfortunate. I'd almost rather have Garrett Wilson on both sides of that combination. I suspect he can throw the ball. Maybe not as well as Zach Wilson, but I don't know. I feel like I got more faith in that. Dalvin Cook, probably an opportunity to chew into Breece Hall. Might chew in and poach the touchdown as the worst case scenario. I don't think there's anything downboard Allen Lazard, Tyler Conklin. It's at best mix and match parts, but I don't really see it. And then on the rest of the Patriots side, outside of the top two guys who were projected out like just, mediocre, okay. Ramondre's going up against the 10th ranked 5.9 yard per, 9th ranked 3.5 yard per rush attempt. And Mac Jones going up against the 10th ranked pass defense for the Jets, 5.9 yards per pass attempt. Not really working with great weapons either. Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster. That's a list of guys that I didn't want to play when they were on better teams that he's got to work with. So don't really love it outside of Ramondre on the New England side. By the numbers, Mac is throwing the ball 48 times a game. There's that. 273.5 yards, 4 touchdowns. Only giving us 3.4 air yards per attempt, 7.9 intended air yards per attempt, 5.7 yards per pass attempt. Zach Wilson in his 2 games, 24 attempts per game, has thrown 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions already. 7.7 intended air yards per attempt, but only 3.1 completed, 6.5 yards per pass attempt. I just don't really see it. Do we really want to go to this pass attack outside of just some Garrett Wilson one-offs? Not for me. 21st ranked, 24th ranked on both sites. Low end. Larry's catching up. He's only 6 minutes behind. Can he catch us before the show ends? Ramondre really, he's interesting. Pretty highly projected. 7th on DK, 9th on 7th on DK, 9th by value, 8th on FanDuel, 5th by value. Given that the Jets are pretty good on defense, I don't know how much I buy into that, but Ramondre is very good. 13.5 rushing attempts per game, giving us, this shouldn't be divided by 2. That's why that's been weird. Oh, no, yeah, sure. It's yards per game. My bad. So 37.5 yards per game, 1 touchdown. 2.4 yards before contact, only 0.4 yards after contact. 4.5 targets a game, 3.5 targets a game for Zeke. Ramondre is the more interesting of the Patriots options. Little bit of involvement in the passing game. Obviously the focal point of the rushing attack. Breece projects just okay for me. Seemed like there was some enthusiasm in the chat. Obviously a hyper-talented guy, but coming off that knee still, I don't love that. seeing 33% of the snaps on average, 34% last week. Dalvin got 36%. Carter got 32%. It's not just a two-headed backfield. It's almost a kind of three-headed. 33, 44, and 27% on average. In terms of the passing game, everybody getting 2 targets a game. Nobody getting looks in the red zone, but Dalvin's getting carries in the red zone. That was the, I forgot to add that to the board. What was Dalvin's? Dalvin. No, that's not the right game. There we go. I guess I don't have the number. That's annoying. Is it in this one? Bear with me. Why would I want 2022? There we go. 5 rushing attempts in the red zone for Dalvin Cook. 1 rushing attempt in the red zone for Michael Carter. Doesn't look like they've given the ball to Breece in the red zone. It's concerning. 83% of the carries going to Dalvin so far when they've been in the red zone. Could part of that be Breece being gassed from playing well, leading them up to the red zone? Sure. But definitely concerning if they're just willing to hand the ball off to Dalvin in the red zone. Just takes away a little bit of upside for Breece Hall. Apologies that took so long. I thought I had that number a little bit more handy. Oh, I could have just done... I'm dumb. I could have just sorted to inside the 20. Yep, I'm dumb. Oh, well. That was a wasted 30 seconds. Hit the like button for wasted 30 seconds. One of the least entertaining 30-second wastes of time we've had on this show, I'm sure. Larry C. likes Addison a lot more as a second part of a mini stack, especially if he stays around 6%. If Addison's that low owned, I like Addison a lot. Jeremy Savage going to do some more research on Tyreek. Let us know if you find out anything interesting, Joe. Always love taking notes from you guys. As I've said many times, these shows are conversations. This is not me intending to give a lecture. Pacheco is expected to play. Kadarius Toney is expected to play. So it just keeps that Kansas City backfield a little bit murky. Don't really like it. Toney obviously will be out there with his 25% of the snaps and big playability if he happens to catch the ball. All right, let's get back into this one. So, questionable ceiling for Breece. I feel like it's a fairly stable floor, but maybe a questionable ceiling, given the way that the ball's being spread around in that backfield right now, given the way that the other guys are getting the red zone opportunities. Through the air, there's just really nothing to like about this game. Devontae Parker has been banged up, saw 8 targets in the one game he played, 9.5 yards a game, 6 catches, giving us a 6.5 yard ADOT, 7.13 yards per target, 4.65 yards per target on a 15.7 yard ADOT for Kendrick Bourne. Juju Smith-Schuster, these, like I said at the top, these are guys I didn't like when they were playing for other teams. They're just like reluctant options. It's a weak passing attack going up against a good defense. I don't really like any of these guys. You can mix and match to your heart's content with any one of them, but you know, all you're getting is a cheap low-end option. Garrett Wilson, tons and tons of talent. 7 targets a game, 30.2% of the target share, 2 receiving touchdowns, 2 looks in the red zone. He's got a 50-yard play, 68-yard long. That was the big play that he made last week that got him in the end zone that kind of saved his week. Lazard, Conklin, Hardman, Cobb, the rest of these guys. It's a no. A lot of no down there. Could Lazard get in the end zone? Sure. 4,700, 5,800. Moderately projected, moderately ranked. Sees most of the snaps. The clear wide receiver 2. Conklin, the clear tight end 1, sees 87% of the snaps, or 83 on average, 85% on average for Lazard. It's just such a low-end opportunity. 8.63 yards per target for Lazard, 7.43 for Conklin. Red zone-wise, no targets yet. I don't think we need to go to the Jets passing game against New England here, do we? Pretty limited options in this one. It's really Ramondre Stevenson and Garrett Wilson as one-offs. Maybe a little bit of Breece Hall, but I don't love the Breece option. New Orleans and Green Bay. I think we can extract some passing, at least from the New Orleans side. I talked about not being enamored with the Jordan Love Green Bay stack side of this equation. Going up against a 4th-ranked pass defense, projected to be 6th overall by defensive DVOA. Giving up 5 yards a game, yards per rush attempt, 28th ranked so far against the run. So potentially a little bit of upside for Aaron Jones. But if Jones is still banged up, he's been questionable all week, has been practicing, probably going to go. But maybe he's downgraded a little bit in terms of the volume that he gets, and it just becomes like a 50-50 share with A.J. Dillon. Now you're just kind of splitting it. So I don't really love that opportunity. Christian Watson still questionable. Becomes a Luke Musgrave, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed show if he's out. If he's in, I do think you can go to a little bit of Watson on his own. A little bit maybe of Watson and Love. But not much. Not against a good pass defense like this. On this side, Derek Carr I like a lot better. Throws the ball around the field a lot and has some very good weapons to work with in these 3 guys. I like Olave a lot. Shaheed's been doing some dynamite work. Michael Thomas looks a lot of the way back, if not all the way back. Probably not all the way, but a lot of the way back. Juwan Johnson is a capable tight end. Kind of a split opportunity here in the backfield. If Kendry Miller sees more of the volume, he goes up a little bit in opportunity. Potentially a close game and okay total. I just greatly prefer the New Orleans side of this one, I think. I think New Orleans defense might be in play a little bit. Love's been around for a minute, but not the most seasoned guy in the world in terms of actual NFL action. So I think you could throw a little bit of New Orleans defense at him. Nolans. What do they cost? 2,900, 4,100. It's got to rank out fairly well for defense. Oh, come on. Stupid fucking mouse. Technically, Love landing a little bit better on the board. I guess he's got that upside. A little bit higher projection. Might have to take a look at Derek Carr overall. Carr throwing the ball 34.5% of the time, completing 266.5 yards per game. Only 198 yards per game on 26 pass attempts for Jordan Love. He's thrown 6 touchdowns. That's what's kind of kept him in the conversation fantasy-wise. Only 3.7 air yards per attempt. 9.5 intended air yards per attempt, though. So it's not like he's not taking shots. Right? We can see some downfield action here. It's just the pass defense, really, that's got me a little bit away from the Love option. 8 looks in the red zone. He's completed 6 touchdown passes. Neither one of these quarterbacks really going to be running very much. Carr only 1 touchdown pass so far, but throwing the ball 34.5% of the time, 266.5 yards a game, 7.7 yards per pass attempt, 5.6 yards in the air, 9.5 intended air yards per pass attempt. And again, just a lot of weapons to work with in that passing game. Chris Olave, 13th ranked receiver, 31st and 32nd for Rashid Shaheed and Michael Thomas. Those are DK numbers. Everybody fairly relevant value-wise. 79% of the snaps for Olave, 79% for Michael Thomas, 51% for Rashid Shaheed, and then 78% for Juwan Johnson. It's extremely clear-cut outside of whatever Taysom Hill does in his weird role. Everything else is fairly clear cut for these guys. These are not Malik Heath. I didn't mean to go up that high. Chris Olave seeing 31.3% of the targets, 11 a game, 9.43 yards per target. Rashid Shaheed just been dominant so far, 14.3 yard ADOT, 15.2 yards per target. Just awesome so far. 45-yard long for each of those guys. 2 looks apiece in the red zone, with Michael Thomas getting 4 looks in the red zone. Thomas, 25.4% of the target share, a 9.3 yard ADOT. These guys working a little bit more downfield than he is, but he's been the monster target option in the red zone despite a lack of receiving touchdowns. He's getting the opportunities, and he's the cheapest guy, well, on the FanDuel slate anyway, at 58. 5,300 feels appropriate. Rashid Shaheed, pretty cheap on DK. 7th by value on DK at wide receiver. That's an interesting spot. He's been producing. 17.5% of the targets, 5 a game. He's got a touchdown already, and just all that deep action. 14.3 yards per catch. In an offense that I expect is going to be throwing in this spot. Going up against the 15th ranked pass defense by yardage, 6.1 yards per game. Can Rashid Shaheed keep it up? Is he going to get popular because of that? Maybe. He's been a buzzy name over the first 2 weeks. If he gives you anything like the popularity he did the last 2 weeks, it's obviously a primo option. Come on, Mouse. Work with me. Only one game after this. This fucking thing. We talked about the Green Bay side of the passing game just briefly up at the top of the board. Watson yet to play this year. Ranks out okay if he gets out on the field. Ranks out okay. Otherwise, Musgrave ranks decently at tight end. 13.5% of the target share so far with Watson out. Romeo Doubs drawing 15.4%. Jaden Reed, 25%, seeing 7 targets a game. 11.8 yard ADOT. 2 touchdowns for Reed, 2 touchdowns for Doubs. They've been a productive offense through the air in terms of touchdowns. Dontavian Wicks has one on 11.5% of the volume, 3 targets a game. It's just, where do these targets go? Which direction does all this head if we do get Watson back? I think it probably mostly goes a lot of it in Watson's direction. He's their number 1 option by a pretty wide margin. Everybody getting looks in the red zone so far. Had decent conversion rates. They're very cheap, but again, you're just going up against the pass defense that is very, very good. So I don't really like the options on the Green Bay side all that much. A little bit of an uptick overall if they get Watson. And that could play as an uptick for, even though the volume will be a little bit more spread out, it could play as an uptick just because the focus will be more on Watson. That said, if Watson does play, it seems more like it'll be in like a limited role, a couple of routes run. Not like a gimmick or a decoy necessarily, but a limited number of routes, just given how he's only practiced a little bit, was in practice, was out, practiced, then was out again. So not great. Larry C says he's caught up. Rashid Shaheed talk. Kevin O asks, any weather on Sunday? Yes, there is weather. I typically let Vegas take care of the weather, but there is a tropical storm heading toward the eastern seaboard. It's basically here. Let's see. What do we have weather-wise? Yeah, as usual, my weather take is just follow Mr. Roth from over at RG. He just does such a dynamite job, and I am by no means a professional meteorologist, but just taking a quick peek at their free stuff, not giving away anything behind their paywall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games are yellow. Or 6 games are yellow, and the 7th one there is orange. It's basically anything in the East. Baltimore, New York, Miami, Washington is pretty ugly. Tampa Bay, obviously. Well, that one's on a night game. And then you've got just some odd ducks in there like Carolina at Seattle is apparently going to get some weather, but that's out in Seattle. Green Bay is apparently going to get some wind and some rain, but that's in Green Bay. Obviously not going to be impacted by the tropical storm. But yes, there is a significant amount of weather. But again, I just let Vegas handle the weather for me. the way that gets handled is that it's just, it's comes through in the game total. Simple as that. Game total dictates the number of overall opportunities, the number of overall points available, and so on and so forth, and the probabilities and extrapolations beyond that. But a lot of it runs through just how many points do we think are going to be available in this one, and then a range on both sides of that. So Vegas does a lot. If you see one of these totals drop precipitously, that would be why. If like overnight some guys' projections drop like crazy, it's probably because the Vegas total went down, and their projections came down accordingly. Let's see if I can manage to get this board sorted to the last game. This mouse is dying a slow death. Oh, come on, you bastard. This is where my Excel skills are not good enough to know what the commands are for selecting tabs or anything either. I envy people that can work Excel exclusively with a keyboard. I find that amazing. Amazing wizardry. What the hell, man? I just need... There we go. We got it back. All right. Let's go. While we've got control. Tennessee, Cleveland. I do like the opportunity against the pass funnel defense for Deshaun to have a show-me-something game. I like the opportunity for Derrick Henry. I don't love the Tennessee passing game. All right, we've got them all. Now it's a matter of whether they'll let us switch between them. So Tennessee going up against a currently 4th-ranked defense against the run and a 3rd-ranked defense against the pass. Go Cleveland. They were projected to be 8th by DVOA defensively and 7th by DVOA offensively. I feel like they're fulfilling the defensive end of that a little bit more than they are the offensive end so far. For what it's worth, Tennessee, 2nd against the run, 2.7 yards per rush attempt, but 29th, 7.6 yards per pass attempt. We've targeted them with passers and their receivers to start the season, and I think that's going to be a continuing trend just based on how they approach the game and how much they allow through the air. So I like Watson. 61.75, projects out very well. You get the mix of Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt in the backfield there, but I think the focus is going to be on Amari Cooper, a little bit for Elijah Moore, David Njoku. Maybe you see a little bit for Kareem Hunt through the air, certainly familiar with the system. It's not like it's going to take him long to get acclimated. Peoples-Jones, a more limited option through the air, but on the field. On the Tennessee side, it's really, I believe in the star power of Derrick Henry and just all that talent and all that volume that he typically sees. He's seen a little bit of a downturn in volume, although Spears got fewer carries, fewer snaps last week than he did in week 1, and I suspect that normalizes for Henry overall. So I do think there is major opportunity for, or not major opportunity, but I think out of everybody on this team, I think Derrick Henry's got the most opportunity to put up a game. 38.5 point total. Cleveland favored by 3. Probably going to be a fairly defensive-oriented game for going up against Tennessee. So I don't really love any of the options, but Henry would be my guy. Tannehill doesn't project great. DeAndre, assuming he plays, going to be a little banged up, but obviously a premium receiver. Treylon, Chigakonkwo, there's some playable options there. Just not my favorite spot. Deshaun 7th by DK points, 7th by FanDuel points, 3rd on DK, 5th on FanDuel points per dollar value. So we're definitely seeing it for him. Only thrown 2 touchdowns. He's also thrown 2 interceptions so far, but 34.5 pass attempts per game should not be ignored. He's throwing the ball a decent amount of the time. 10.3 intended air yards per attempt shouldn't be ignored. Only completing 3.5 air yards per attempt, 5.6 yards per pass attempt so far, but trying to throw the ball deep. He's had a rushing touchdown, 5.5 rush attempts per game, 6.1 yards per rush attempt. Get him in the end zone on the ground, and we're off and running, and then we'll take what we get through the air. But I like Deshaun for his ability with his arm as much as on the ground. He's proven himself a viable quarterback in years past, just missed so much time that what's left is kind of what we're dealing with right now. For his side, Tannehill's throwing the ball 29 times a game, 222 yards. Just kind of doing Ryan Tannehill things. 1 touchdown, 3 picks. Not great. 9 intended air yards, 4.8 completed air yards per attempt, 7.7 yards per pass attempt overall. 8 looks in the red zone and only 1 touchdown so far. For Deshaun, that's 4 opportunities in the red zone. completed 2 touchdown passes so far. It's obviously the Deshaun show. I think you could squeeze a lot of value there. And just as much on this side, it's the Derrick Henry show. I don't think I want to mess with the Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt part of the situation here now. Ford obviously came in and was the featured guy after Chubb went out last week. 15.5 carries a game, 4.6 yards per rush attempt so far on the season. 2 targets a game so far. Did have a 69-yard long. I don't know. Just with the idea that Hunt comes in, even if he only steals 10 touches, 8 carries and 2 targets, 2 catches. I think it's enough to just kind of bite into the ceiling here. 4,800 is cheap enough. 10th, ranks first by value. All right, so I shouldn't talk down so much about the Ford play, given that he ranks so well by points per dollar. I'm glad I spotted that. It's not a bad projection. I don't know. I have trouble fully trusting the Cleveland ground game when it's not Nick Chubb. Been burnt by it a lot of times over the years, with specifically this guy who came back to this team to just continue doing it to us. So I don't know how much I trust it. How popular is he going to be? I imagine he's popular, right? Jake says Hunt looks good at 4,600. I just don't know how much he's going to touch the ball. That's my one question. I believe in the talent wholeheartedly at that price. And he doesn't really honestly need to touch the ball all that many times. He's dynamic enough. 10% for Ford. So yeah, I mean, given the nature of the value projection, I might look at that one again. Keep an eye on it going into the morning. Might take a look at where we compare to the industry, see what's going on. But yeah, if he's got that kind of a value when we start building lineups tomorrow morning, I guess we are going to have to get a little bit involved. I just don't love the work share or the potential work share. Tajee Spears, 45% of the snaps on average, but went down to 37 last week. Henry bounced back up to 71% last week. I expect it normalizes with a strong lean in his direction. 20 rushing attempts per game, 71.5 yards. Got a touchdown already, 3.6 yards per rushing attempt. 1.6 yards after contact, 2 yards before. It's Derrick Henry. Just a bulldozer when he's on the right day. Spears is giving us 6.9 yards per rush attempt, which is very good. 3.9 yards before contact, 3 yards after contact, but limited opportunities. In the passing game, I like the weapons that Deshaun has to work with against the pass funnel defense. At the very least, I like Amari Cooper. 12th by DK value, 4th by FanDuel value. Sign me up. 6,200 on the FanDuel slate, 57 on the DK slate. 2 games, seeing 9 targets a game, 24.6% of the overall team targets. Elijah Moore drawing 23.2% of the targets. Not uninteresting. 3 catches a game, 8 targets a game. Not ideal. An 11.5 yard ADOT, so works downfield a decent amount and has a lot of big play ability. Whether or not that comes through, whether or not he actually delivers on the talent that we've seen from him in the past, primarily going back a couple years, it's in question. But for 4,700, 6,100, definitely like it better on DK. But I think he's at least involved in a passing attack that we're going to go to with a quarterback that we want to get to. We don't want to just make it Amari. We don't want to make it Deshaun and Amari all day. So we want some Elijah Moore in there. David Njoku projects out pretty well. 7th overall by tight end point scoring. Limited position overall, so you got to take your shots with guys like this. If Njoku gets in the end zone, that's all we really need. 10% target share. Not a lot of opportunities to do it. Hasn't seen a red zone target yet. Projects out well for the money. Peoples-Jones, 88% of the snaps, 8.6% of the targets. Not great. 8-yard ADOT, 3.17 yards per target. Hasn't gotten in the end zone. Kind of an afterthought in this passing attack. Harrison Bryant is got one look in the end zone. I think that came week 1. Overall, an afterthought in the passing attack, but the idea that they might look his direction if they get the ball into the end zone and have an opportunity is not completely off the table. That said, it's not a showdown slate, so like the amount of times I want to go to a very cheap second tight end, they're very, very limited. Even in extremely large field tournaments, I don't think we need to get that cute. On the Tennessee side, to round things out, DeAndre seems like he's going to play. Been banged up, but going to give it a whirl. Drawing 9 targets a game, 31.6% of the volume, a massive target share. 17.5% for Nick Westbrook-Ikini, 12.3% for Treylon Burks. Treylon's been a little bit disappointing overall. 4 targets a game, only catching 2.5, putting up a 15.6 yard ADOT and a 13.43 yards per target. It's just the volume. I'd like to see a little bit more volume. Would have been interesting to see him jump into the number 1 role if DeAndre didn't go. Maybe he sees a little bit of an uptick in volume just if DeAndre is a little bit limited by his injury. I forgot to change Chigakwanko's name. He has... I'm gonna look him up over here in the corner because it's just easier. Unification of naming conventions. That's what I want. That's what we need. First game, Chig saw 2 targets. Second, it didn't catch either of them. Second game, saw 4 targets, caught them all. 35 yards. Hasn't been in the end zone yet. Hasn't really been overly relevant yet. 8.8 yards per reception on the 35 yards last week with a 20-yard long. So really broke one of them for 20 and then had 15 over the next 3. So 5 yards per catch on the next 3. An option at the tight end position obviously ranks very, very well given the very low cost. But it's just a passing attack that I don't want to get into all that much. Points per dollar is great on DK at 3,200. All you need is the touchdown. Or a couple catches and some yards. But it's a really limited passing attack. I don't really like it. Going up against a pretty decent defense. I don't know. I think if I'm taking any shots with Tennessee, I'd probably prefer to take them downfield. Maybe I take the Treylon shares. 5.8 yard ADOT for Nick Westbrook. Not ideal. 17.5% of the targets. Wasn't he more downfield last year? Yeah, last year Nick Westbrook-Ikini had a 12.8 yard ADOT. 397 yards, got in the end zone 3 times. 7.94 yards per target. So it was working a little bit more downfield than he has so far this year. This year, again, just a 5.8 yard ADOT. Limited. Obviously doesn't project very well. 70th on both sites by wide receiver. Once you get down to wide receiver 70, I don't think you need to sweat it all that much. Don't need to overthink it. That's about it, gang. I think that's all the games, right? We didn't skip anything, did we? It's a good run. 2 hours and 57 minutes. Coming up on the 3-hour mark. A lot of talking. A lot of lineup building. OS says best CJ Stroud stack and run back. So just to round it out, here's the overall stacks board one last time. Just with the way that the quarterback and his top 3 options, whether running back, tight end, or wide receiver, rank out by points and value. You can kind of suss out who those guys are if you do the math on that, adding up the salaries if you need to. In terms of that Indy Houston stack, I mean, Nico's the obvious guy, but given that Tank and Robert Woods are both getting a little bit of volume, I think they're in play. But Schultz is actually kind of a sneaky option there. As we saw with Schultz, he projects out fairly well. He's not very expensive. He's on the field a ton. He sees 12.8% of the target volume, 6 targets a game. And he's gotten 2 looks in the red zone. 3 looks in the red zone for Robert Woods, I think makes Robert Woods also a little bit sneaky in this offense. Just the idea that they're willing to throw to him, he's going to be the 3rd guy that people click on. It's going to be primarily Nico stacks. And then I think people will be more inclined to go to Tank Dell for a little bit cheaper and just the more buzzy name, the young player versus the older veteran guy, where I think there's a ton of value in the snaps, the targets, the red zone looks. There's a lot of value there. So I know I'm kind of just naming all the players on their team to answer your question about what the best overall CJ Stroud stack is. But I think it's a matter of, are you building it once or are you building it 15 times? because I think there's a lot of different options here. The best pure option is Nico, just off the top. He's his favorite target. He sees a ton of volume. He's been productive with it. But these guys are not bad mixers. These guys are guys that I would want to differentiate. If you want to go two-man, Nico Woods is probably the best bet. But any of these three guys with Nico would be a good two-man. And then you've got very capable run backs on the other side. Either of these guys, Ingram or Travis Etienne, the running back. I think any one of those four guys is a capable run back play. So you've got a lot of ways to create value in that stack. If you just stick Evan Ingram into the tight end position for 4,800, you're creating a little bit of value in that stack. If you stick Christian Kirk in there for 5,400, you're creating a little bit of value in that stack. So I like the way that game clicks together. I like the pace in that game. I like the potential for that game to be a sneaky little shootout. Gonna have a decent amount of that one. Larry C says Tennessee is really good against the run too. See Josh Kelly last week. There you go. Yeah, they were, what was it, second against the run and just funneling everything to the pass and terrible against the pass as we saw. Mom, are you just getting here? Mama says, sup everybody. Mama's checking in at 9 o'clock for the 6 o'clock show after we go 3 hours talking about football. Give it a little rewind, pop it on to 2x speed, pop a gummy, smoke a bowl, do your thing. That's what I'm going to be doing. Going to have all the projections overnight. Going to get an update. All the rankings overnight. Going to get an update. Above below column. If you guys missed that last week, we drilled that column last week. Like 7 out of our 10 picks. Hit pretty hard. The point of that column is I'm just looking at my projections versus industry average projections from a couple different sources. I don't reveal who the sources are or what their projections are. I just give you, I'm a little bit above the projection, point or two above the industry average projection on this guy, a little bit below on that guy. Creates opportunities. It informs I'll probably be ahead of the field on these plays. I'll probably be behind the field on these plays. So I got into that feature last week when I wrote it. I'm excited to punch it up for this week. That'll be up overnight. What else? I'm going to be building like 50,000 lineups overnight and doing the full update for Sunday on the Stacks and Groups article, which went up yesterday or early this morning. So there's a lot of content. Week 3 projections are still free. All the rankings, every article I just mentioned, this show, every last little piece of content and everything you can need for week 3 of football for free at rotoscouts. Follow the at rotoscouts Twitter handle. Do me a favor over there. Follow that Twitter handle. If you see something pop up and you have an opportunity, give it a like, give it a retweet. Just helps us build a little bit of a following, helps some people find us, join our club here. That's about it, gang. Larry C says, Terry, please start charging next week so I can buy a new mouse. No, I'm going to badmouth Logitech until they send me one for free. That's my new plan. Sponsored by Logitech. I'll have a big banner in the back. I don't know about next week. I was thinking maybe after week 4 would throw a little something up there. See how it goes. If I win the Millie this week, it'll probably stay free all season. Who knows? With that, guys, I do think I'm going to punch out. Mama says, damn, I missed it all. That's why the rewind comes in handy, my friend. I appreciate you coming out and jumping on here, Mamba, and hit that like button for me, buddy. But, yeah, ton of analysis there. It's going to live up on YouTube. You got, 12, 15-ish hours to digest. So plenty of time still to listen in. But I appreciate everybody who hung out. This is a blast to do. I promise you guys, I do not intend to do this every week with just a marathon show on Saturdays. I would so much rather space this out during the week. It's just been tough to make that happen. But like now that I feel like we've got everything in one place, all the board is set, a little bit easier to talk it through now that I'm caught up on the season and who's where and what's going on and everything. Hopefully it'll be easier and baseball will get out of the way a little bit and we'll be able to do those during the week shows. But you guys rocking. This has been a blast to do these marathons on Saturdays the last couple of weeks. With that in mind, I'll be around Discord. Site will be updated for tomorrow. Hit me up with any questions in Discord, on Twitter, etc., etc. Not sure what we'll do show-wise tomorrow. Probably, certainly not going to be a baseball show. Not going to be on in the morning for just let the other guys have the Sunday morning chaos. I like to have my focus on my lineups. But maybe we'll jump on and do something for the showdown slate for tomorrow night. Keep it tuned. Hit the subscribe button. With that, good luck out there. somebody go win something this weekend. See you.